Chapter 1193. Qinchuan's idea was very simple and his goal was clear. He could lead the human race and the demon race out of the land of exile and return to the universe. However, he couldn't fully shoulder the responsibility of the human race and the demon race. This wasn't something that he could do alone or with the help of a few people. This was a long-term task that required more people to step forward. Now, what they needed to do was the first step, which was also the most difficult step. Let more like-minded people step forward. It didn't matter if their realms were low or they didn't have the strength. People would always grow. Before these people grew, Qinchuan would act as a big umbrella and protect the two races as much as possible. Perhaps in the past, many people had regarded Qinchuan as a savior and a great hero. However, from beginning to end, Qinchuan didn't think of himself as a savior or a great hero. Everything he did was within the scope of his ability. He wouldn't do anything that was beyond his ability. Although Qinchuan always boasted that he was a person with great luck, if a person relied on luck for everything, then that person would die sooner or later. Qinchuan didn't think that he could live forever. Perhaps one day he would leave this world. However, he hoped that before he left, the human race and the demon race wouldn't rely on him and wouldn't need his support. This way, he could die with peace of mind. It sounded a bit grand, but in the end, whether it was the human race or the demon race, who didn't have such a grand wish? The only difference between Qinchuan and those people was that Qinchuan was stronger and could do more things. Apart from this, he was no different from most people. Luzi was silent for a long time. She was thinking about what Qinchuan said earlier. She could understand Qinchuan, but she always felt that Qinchuan was a bit too hasty. However, if Luzi knew about Qinchuan's experience during the tribulation and knew about the existence of the human face, then perhaps she wouldn't think that Qinchuan was too hasty. Qinchuan just wanted to do as much as possible before he encountered any mishaps. In the end, Luzi decided to put aside her worries for the time being and fully support Qinchuan. Qinchuan, I support your decision. Qinchuan smiled when he heard this. He turned his head to look at the others and said, Now, it's time for all of you to make a decision. I will not force you to stay. Regardless of whether it is Yi Yu or Yin Su, all of you have the right to choose. Knight Serenity and Argentin, who were called out by Qinchuan, understood that Qinchuan still needed their help before he reached the body integration stage. But now, Qinchuan had reached the body integration stage, so their existence was meaningless. So now, Qinchuan was willing to return their freedom to them. Yin Su looked guiltily at Qinchuan and said, You were the one who saved me and protected the Yin clan. I owe you. I should have helped you wholeheartedly. But I'm sorry, I still have the Yin clan behind me that I need to take care of. Hearing Argentin's words, Qinchuan didn't hesitate and immediately cancelled the slave contract between him and Argentin. Then he said to Argentin, I can understand you, so I'm willing to return your freedom. Sensing the disappearance of the slave contract, Argentin looked at Qinchuan with a complicated expression and said, Thank you, Qinchuan. Qinchuan nodded and turned to Knight Serenity and asked, What about you? Just a moment ago, when he cancelled Argentin's slave contract, Qinchuan also cancelled Knight Serenity's slave contract. Knight Serenity pursed her lips and replied, Sir, Knight Serenity is willing to continue serving Sir. Knight Serenity's situation was different from Argentin's. Argentin had the Yin clan to take care of, but Knight Serenity was alone. As for the pirates on the necromancy, they were just strangers who met by chance. Without Knight Serenity, they would soon seek refuge with other experts. Therefore, Knight Serenity didn't have any feelings for them. In short, Knight Serenity was alone, so following Qinchuan might be her best choice. After all, Qinchuan had the true dragon bloodline. In terms of bloodline, he was her superior. Qinchuan nodded and looked at Bela and Caro. For Bela and Caro, this was their second chance to make a choice today. However, they didn't hesitate and made the same choice. Sir, we sisters are still willing to serve you. Since that's the case, let's part ways here. Qin Chuan turned his head to look at Yin Su and said, I can only respect your choice. I will absolutely not be dissatisfied with it. Argentin looked at Qin Chuan deeply and said, If you don't mind, I am willing to represent the Yin clan and become allies with the human clan. We will advance and retreat together. Qin Chuan laughed and said, Of course I am willing. Now that the matter had been settled, while everyone was relieved of some of their worries, some other worries arose in their hearts. During the meal, everyone was quiet. Even Qin Chuan, who always liked to talk and was good at adjusting the atmosphere, was silent. For cultivators, there was no difference between day and night. They could still eat, drink, play, or cultivate. However, when they weren't cultivating, Qin Chuan was used to sleeping at night. This was the first time Qin Chuan had insomnia at night. It was funny that a cultivator, a body integration stage cultivator, would suffer from insomnia. What are you thinking about? LVZ walked to the balcony and looked at Qin Chuan, who was standing on the balcony and gazing into the distance. Even at night, the messy rock star was still brightly lit and bustling with noise and excitement. To the shopkeepers, there was no such thing as closing time. After hearing Lu Zi's words, Qin Chuan faintly said, I am reflecting on myself. Qin Chuan was indeed reflecting on himself. Although he had made a decision and decided to act according to his plan, it didn't mean that he was completely right. In the land of exile, not everyone was willing to come out and wander. Maybe some people wanted to stay in the land of exile and continue to be the king of the mountain. They didn't want to suddenly fall from a lofty peak expert to an ant that could be crushed at any time. Similarly, the revival of the human clan and the demon clan was too far away for some people. Qin Chuan was very clear that once he went back, he would definitely be supported by a group of people. He had to be responsible for these people. Therefore, he had to do his best to avoid some things from happening. Therefore, he needed to reflect on himself and find a loophole to plug it. Chapter 1194. The next morning, Qin Chuan and the rest parted ways at Messy Rock. Argentin set off to return to Stansos, while Qin Chuan and the rest headed directly to Tron Nebula, preparing to return to the land of exile. Bela was rich, so she bought the fastest war-class spaceship at a high price. It was called Lightning. With lightning speed, it would take them at least 4 years to return to Tron Nebula from Messy Rocks. Qin Chuan was curious. How did Zerg arrive at Tron Nebula so quickly? Bela explained to Qin Chuan that Zerg arrived at Tron Nebula so quickly because Zerg's spaceship was an aircraft carrier-class spaceship, which had the ability to perform ultra-long-distance interstellar warp. The Lightning's interstellar warp distance was only about 1/20th of that of an aircraft carrier-class spaceship. Therefore, the best way for Qin Chuan and the rest was to return to Stansos first, then use the Tian people's teleportation portal to teleport directly to Tron Nebula. If we knew we were going to return to Stansos, we would have gone with Argentin. Lu Zi looked at Qin Chuan with a smile. It was rare for Qin Chuan to make a mistake. She always thought that Qin Chuan had a flawless plan. Qin Chuan looked awkwardly at Lu Zi and shrugged helplessly. Even a wise man would make mistakes sometimes, and he was not a wise man. It took 19 days to return to Stansos from Messy Rocks through 13 interstellar portals. When Qin Chuan and the rest returned to Stansos, it happened to be the time of the Celestial Cluster's Overlord Gathering, which was held once every 100 years. The Overlord Gathering was a platform provided by the Tian people for all the universe overlords of the Celestial Cluster to communicate. Universe overlords who did not meet often could use this opportunity to exchange information or barter. As the organizer, the Tian people did not ask for any remuneration, and they would also provide security for the transactions between the universe overlord. Therefore, every time the gathering was held, universe overlords from all over the world would return to Stansos to participate in the gathering. In the past, although Qinchuan's power was comparable to that of a universe overlord, he had not reached the form synthesis stage. Therefore, he did not care much about the gathering. Now that he had reached the form synthesis stage and become one of the overlords, he naturally wanted to participate in such an event. Just as Qinchuan was about to ask Thelon or Sharmila about the situation, Thelon found him first. Qinchuan was not surprised that Thelon took the initiative to visit him. After all, Stansos was the Tian people's territory. It was difficult for him to hide his presence from the Tian people. Moreover, he did not deliberately hide his whereabouts. "Congratulations!" Thelon congratulated Qinchuan as soon as he saw Qinchuan. Obviously, he already knew that Qinchuan had reached the form synthesis stage. "Not long ago, I met Argentine and learned from her that you have reached the form synthesis stage." Thelon sighed with emotion. "I remember that when we first met you were only at the middle stage of the Dongxi realm. Your speed of improvement is too fast." When Qinchuan heard this, he chuckled and said to Tai Long, "In adversity, people always yearn for more power." Upon hearing Qinchuan's words, Thelon looked at Qinchuan with a subtle expression and asked, "Do you think your current strength is enough to help you walk out of adversity?" Qinchuan smiled and replied, "If it's just me alone, it's naturally enough. But if there are more people, it's not enough. It's still lacking a little." If Qinchuan wanted to protect the human race and the demon race, he had to at least reach the crossing calamity stage and become one of the few supreme existences in the universe. Only then would he be qualified and have more confidence. Thelon already knew Qinchuan's identity and understood what Qinchuan meant. He smiled and said to Qinchuan, "Turan City is now yours. You can do whatever you want at any time." Qinchuan came back this time with the intention of meeting the elders and telling them about this matter. Now that he heard Thelon's words, Qinchuan understood that Thelon was here to pass the message on behalf of the elders. In that case, there was no need for him to make another trip. "Then I'll have to trouble you to thank the elders on my behalf." Qinchuan smiled and said to Thelon, "Also, I want to attend the gathering of the overlords. Can I?" Thelon laughed and said, "Of course, there's no problem. All the universe overlords in the celestial cluster are qualified to attend the gathering of the overlords. This is also the main reason why I'm looking for you this time." Qinchuan was curious and asked, "Is there anything special that I need to pay attention to?" Thelon shook his head and answered, "It's nothing special. It's just an unwritten rule. I want to know what Brother Qin wants from the gathering of the overlords and what you want to trade." Qinchuan understood. Thelon wanted to do a statistical survey so that he could make the necessary arrangements during the gathering of the overlords. This would save everyone time and effort. However, did the Tian people really have to go to this extent? Thelon seemed to have seen through Qinchuan's doubts. He said to Qinchuan, "This gathering of the overlords is a little special. Other than the normal exchanges and trades, we Tian people also want to use this opportunity to recruit some people." Qinchuan was surprised to hear this. He asked, "Are the Tian people short of people?" Thelon smiled bitterly and said to Qinchuan, "Originally, we weren't short of people. However, not long ago, when we left Pegasus Star, we had a conflict with the Protoss. Some of our people died in the conflict. Recently, the Protoss has been recruiting overlords from all over the universe. Just in case we have to follow suit. We hope that we can use this gathering to leave a good impression on all the overlords so that we can recruit them." After listening to Thelon's explanation, Qinchuan couldn't help but feel awkward. Speaking of which, the conflict between the Tian people and the Protoss was because of him. However, this didn't mean that the Tian people didn't have any problems at all. After all, the Tian people were the ones who traded Tron Nebula with him in exchange for Province's death. Strictly speaking, the Tian people were at least 50% responsible. If that wasn't the case, Thelon wouldn't have been so friendly to him. Then what can I do for you? No matter what, the Tian people were now important allies of Qinchuan. If the Tian people needed help, Qinchuan wouldn't mind helping them to the best of his ability. Chapter 1195. Thelon had been waiting for Qinchuan to say this. There will be several talisman array masters from other star clusters participating in this overlord's gathering. They are all 7th level talisman array masters, and what they desire the most is a 7th level talisman array master. Thelon looked at Qinchuan with a subtle expression and said, "We hope that you will allow us to use the 7th level battle arrays you have provided us as a trade condition to recruit these talisman array masters." There was an agreement between Qinchuan and the Tian people. When Qinchuan reached the body integration stage, he would provide the Tian people with 7th level battle arrays of various attribute. The Tian people had never forgotten this agreement, and neither had Qinchuan. However, Qinchuan had only agreed to provide the 7th level battle arrays to the Tian people, and not to others. Therefore, before using these battle arrays, the Tian people had to first obtain Qinchuan's approval. Qinchuan naturally had no objection to this. He chuckled and said to Thelon, "If they are willing to join the Tian people, then they will naturally become part of the Tian people. It is reasonable for us to provide them with battle arrays. I have no objection. You Tian people can make the decision yourselves." Thelon immediately felt relieved after hearing Qinchuan's words. After all, those battle arrays were still in the hands of Qinchuan and had not yet been handed over to the Tian people. Now that Qinchuan had no objection, Thelon took the opportunity to ask Qinchuan to give him the method of engraving battle arrays. Qinchuan did not refuse. He straightforwardly handed over the 7th level battle arrays of various attributes to Thelon, including the spatial battle array. Thelon carefully put away the engraving method of the spatial battle array and said to Qinchuan, "Except for the direct descendants of the Tian people, we will never teach this spatial battle array to anyone else." Qinchuan smiled and said, "I think so too. It is more appropriate for such an important battle array to be in the hands of our own people." Thelon received Qinchuan's reply and got what he wanted. After agreeing to go to the gathering together, he took his leave. Not long after Thelon left, Sharmila arrived. "Qinchuan, you have gone too far." Sharmila had just entered the room and shouted at Qinchuan. Qinchuan looked at Sharmila in confusion. He didn't seem to have done anything to offend Sharmila. Sharmila walked up to Qinchuan angrily and said, "Your cultivation is obviously lower than mine. Why did you reach the form synthesis stage earlier than me? I was severely taught a lesson by my teacher. He ordered me to reach the form synthesis stage within 3 years. Otherwise, he would punish me by sending me to the Tiandao mountain to practice in seclusion." Hearing Sharmila's words, Qinchuan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He said, "You can't blame me for this. I can't suppress my cultivation and wait for you slowly." Sharmila looked around and suddenly asked Qinchuan quietly, "Do you have any special tricks to improve your strength quickly? Can you share it with me?" Looking at Sharmila's sneaky look, Qinchuan couldn't help but feel a little amused. When he first met Sharmila, he thought Sharmila was a cold, arrogant, and strong princess. However, as they gradually became familiar with each other, he found that Sharmila's brain circuit was sometimes very strange. She didn't put on any airs of a princess and had always been high and mighty. "I don't have any clever tricks to teach you." Qinchuan smiled. "Cultivation is not something that can be achieved overnight, and it can't be taken a detour. It's more practical to be down to earth and take one step at a time." Hearing Qinchuan's words, Sharmila immediately curled her lips and said, "It's so annoying. Why do you like to preach to others like my teacher? You're young but mature." Sharmila glared at Qinchuan and then went to find Lu Zi. She didn't want to listen to Qinchuan's lecture. in a luxurious hotel in the 66th district. Dressed in a red robe, Sam stood on the balcony and looked calmly at the scenery and people in the distance. In his opinion, these beautiful scenery should belong to the One God sect, and these people should believe in the one true God, atheists. As the cardinal of the One God sect, Sam rarely left the Deus cluster. However, this time, he had no choice but to leave the Deus cluster and come to Stansos. This was because there was a person he had to kill, Chinchuan. Sam had always remembered this name, not only because Chinchuan was the ferocious beast who had killed the great divine prince, Province, but also because Chinchuan had killed 20 overlords at the combination stage of the One God sect. Among them, 4 high priests had also been indirectly killed by Chinchuan. Even the powerful One God sect felt distressed at such a huge loss. However, apart from feeling distressed, there was more anger. It had been too many years since someone had dared to challenge the dignity of the One God sect. If they couldn't make Chinchuan pay the price, then the One God sect would be too ashamed to preach in other star clusters in the future. This time, Pope Saint Baudelo had given Sam a death order. He had to kill Chinchuan no matter what method he had to use. Therefore, Sam came to Stansos and patiently waited for Chinchuan's return. Finally, God didn't disappoint those who waited. He had been waiting for news of Chinchuan's return. We didn't receive an invitation to the gathering of the overlords in 10 days. The person who spoke was a high priest standing behind Sam. His name was Jie, and he was a good friend of Lucas. This time, he had volunteered to follow Sam to Stansos, hoping to avenge Lucas with his own hands. When they came to Stansos, they did not inform the Tian people openly. It could be said that they had snuck in quietly. Although it was not difficult for the Tian people to discover them with their abilities, the Tian people did not take the initiative to contact them, as if nothing had happened. Before this, they thought that this was a good thing, but when the news of the gathering of the overlords spread, and they learned that Chinchuan would also be attending the gathering, things became a little awkward. According to common sense, they were qualified to participate in the overlords' gathering. But because they sneaked into Stansos and the Sky Race deliberately ignored them, they didn't receive an invitation. And without an invitation, if they wanted to force their way in, the Sky Race could legitimately make a move on them. Even killing them wouldn't be a problem. Therefore, they were now faced with a dilemma, and that was whether or not they should reveal their identities. If they revealed their identities, they would be able to get an invitation to the gathering of the overlords. Publicly attacking Chinchuan had its advantages, but at the same time, there were also disadvantages. That was, Chinchuan might not attend the gathering and find a place to hide. Then, it would be very difficult for them to find Chinchuan again. If they did not reveal their identities, then the Tian people would be able to find trouble with them and obstruct them from doing things. Therefore, they were in a dilemma. Chapter 1196. Tribulation Realm was in a dilemma, but he was lucky because he was only the high priest and did not have the authority to make decisions. The person who should be in a dilemma was Sam. Sam was silent for a moment after hearing Tribulation Realm's words. After weighing the pros and cons, he said to Tribulation Realm, "Go and inform the Tian people that Cardinal Sam of the One God religion is here for a friendly visit. He hopes to participate in the Overlord gathering and preach the teachings of the One God religion." Tribulation Realm hesitated when he heard Sam's words. But won't Chinchuan be scared away? They had hidden their identities and sneaked into Stansos because they were worried that they would scare away Chinchuan. If they revealed their identities now, it would be troublesome if Chinchuan escaped after hearing the news. Sam said faintly, "You don't have to worry about that. Just do as I say." Although Sam had never met Chinchuan, he could tell from the information he had collected about Chinchuan that Chinchuan was a very confident and smart person. He would never avoid a problem that could be solved, and he could always make a rational decision when faced with a difficult problem. Now that Qin Chuan had advanced to the combination stage, he believed that Qin Chuan would not run away again. Tribulation Realm immediately lowered his head and said, "Yes, I understand." Soon, Tribulation Realm revealed his identity to the Tian people through the One God Religion's channels. He hoped to visit Stansos and participate in the Overlord Gathering 10 days later to preach the teachings of the One God Religion. The person in charge of handling this matter and receiving Tribulation Realm was Thelon. Thelon and Tribulation Realm had a brief chat. Both sides were very happy, but after Tribulation Realm left in satisfaction, Thelon's expression became serious. As early as 2 months ago, he already knew that Qin Chuan and the others had come to Stansos. They had been living in Area 66 and investigating the matter of Qin Chuan. However, at that time, Qin Chuan wasn't in Stansos, and the Tian people didn't want to have another conflict with the Protoss, so they pretended that nothing had happened. When Qin Chuan returned, Thelon had thought that the Protoss would make things difficult for Qin Chuan, but he did not expect the Protoss to make such a blatant show of goodwill in the name of the One God Religion and request to participate in the Overlord Party 10 days later. In the face of such a request, Thelon had no reason to refuse, nor could he refuse. Therefore, after sending Tribulation Realm away, Thelon immediately set off to find Qin Chuan and explain the matter to Qin Chuan. After hearing about the situation with the Protoss from Thelon, Qin Chuan chuckled and said, "If I remember correctly, the cardinals of the One God Religion should be at the pinnacle of the combination realm, right?" Thelon nodded and said to Qin Chuan, "The One God Religion has a total of 12 cardinals, each of whom is at the pinnacle of the combination realm. This Qin Chuan is ranked 6th among the 12 cardinals, so he's not weak." Hearing Thelon's words, Qin Chuan smiled and said, "Just act according to the original plan. If the One God Religion wants to make trouble for me, you don't have to worry too much. I'll handle it myself." Upon hearing this, Thelon was slightly stunned. Then, he looked at Qin Chuan with a subtle expression and asked, "Are you confident?" Qin Chuan nodded and said frankly, "If there's only one Sam, the One God Religion won't be able to threaten me." Qin Chuan was very confident. He was no longer at the pinnacle of the insightful Void Realm. He had to rely on the power of the mysterious snake to deal with the One God Religion. Now, he was an overlord at the middle stage of the combination realm. With his own strength, not to mention Sam, even if the Pope of the One God Religion, Saint Baudelo, came in person, he would not be afraid. Of course, Qin Chuan would not say this out loud. After all, it was too arrogant. It was better to keep a low profile. If he really provoked Saint Baudelo, it would be troublesome to deal with him. Seeing Qin Chuan so confident, Thelon was no longer worried. After a brief chat, he left. After Thelon left, Lu Zi came out and asked Qin Chuan, "Did the One God Religion come again?" Qin Chuan nodded and replied, "It seems that I didn't hurt the One God Religion enough the previous 2 times. This time, they lost another cardinal. They should know not to provoke me if they can. It's best not to provoke me." Lu Zi sat down beside Qin Chuan and asked, "Are you planning to use this matter to establish your authority?" Qin Chuan smiled and said to Lu Zi, "Little Zi knows me best. That's right, I'm planning to use this matter to establish my authority. It's impossible to hide the fact that the human race and the demon race have returned to the universe. It's bound to attract the attention of many parties, and even hostility and probing. If I can establish my authority with the help of a cardinal, then those people with ulterior motives will have to be careful of my revenge if they want to take action against the human race and the demon race. A person with no attachments is the scariest." Hearing Qin Chuan's words, Lu Zi looked at Qin Chuan with some heartache and said, "It's been hard on you." Qin Chuan smiled and shook his head, saying, "It's not hard. It's never hard to do what I like." As the date of the Overlord Gathering drew closer and closer, the list of overlords participating in the Overlord Gathering was no longer a secret. Many overlords had already received the list in advance and knew the origins of some of the treasures that would appear at the gathering. In the past, the overlords were most concerned about the treasures. However, this time, the overlords were most concerned about the enmity between the two parties. One party was the one-god religion, and the other party was naturally Qinchuan. It was no secret that Qinchuan had killed Province on the celestial planet. Although it had caused a stir at that time, not many overlords were concerned about it. However, after that, Qinchuan had destroyed 300 oracles of the Protoss with the help of the mysterious snake on the Pegasus star. The last time a large number of overlords at the combination stage had fallen was more than 3,000 years ago. Since then, Qinchuan had officially entered the sights of many overlords. At the same time, the news that Qinchuan had killed 2 level 3 great beings from the Void Empire in the Dream Race also spread. A young man who could fight against overlords of the universe at the Dongshu stage was worthy of their attention and attention. After the incident on the Pegasus star, Qinchuan had disappeared for a period of time. When he reappeared, he had already reached the combination stage. This shocked many overlords because Qinchuan's progress was too fast. Now, the one-god religion had taken the initiative to reveal their identity and made it clear that they wanted to deal with Qinchuan. Qinchuan did not choose to avoid them. It could be said that he was quite confident. At this time, many overlords could not help but look forward to the meeting between Qinchuan and Sam. It would definitely be exciting. Just as everyone was looking forward to it, the day of the Overlord gathering quietly arrived. Chapter 1197. The Overlord gathering was held in the 20th District. The 20th District was the most luxurious public area in Stansos. Every Overlord gathering was held here, and this time was no exception. The Overlord gathering would last for 10 days. During these 10 days, the overlords who came to participate in the gathering could freely enter and exit the 20th District to trade treasures or information. They could even work together to explore some ancient ruins. The Heaven race would not interfere and would only maintain the order of the gathering. When the gathering started, more than 10 overlords arrived at the 20th District. They sat in the luxurious hall and either closed their eyes to meditate or whispered to each other. These overlords had only reached the body fusion stage in recent years. Most of them were only at the early stage of the body fusion stage. Although there were only a few people in the hall, no one was surprised. This was because this had happened in the past. Overlords with powerful treasures or powerful cultivation would only show up a few days later. It was worth mentioning that under such circumstances, the overlords were allowed to bring a junior to the gathering to broaden their horizons. To the overlords, this gathering might not be a big deal, but to the juniors, being able to attend such a gathering was enough to brag about for 100 years. The juniors brought by the overlords who had arrived early gathered together. They observed the situation in the hall while chatting. The topic of their conversation was related to Qinchuan. A Tian people girl who was dressed exquisitely looked at her companions and asked, "How many days do you think Qinchuan will be here?" Although everyone knew that Qinchuan had reached the body fusion stage and become an overlord of the universe, not many people knew that Qinchuan had reached the middle stage of the body fusion stage. Therefore, in everyone's impression, Qinchuan should be the same as the other overlords present. He was just a junior. Hearing the girl's words, a tall man from the red race wearing a white suit chuckled and said, "Qinchuan may be strong, but he's only at the early stage of the body fusion stage. In my opinion, he'll be here tomorrow at the latest." That's not necessarily true. Qinchuan was able to face off against an overlord when he was at the Dongshu stage. Now that he's reached the Dongshu stage, he must be even stronger. I estimate that he'll only show up on the 5th day. Someone objected. They felt that Qinchuan wouldn't show up so early. The person who objected was from the blue race. The relationship between the blue race and the red race had never been harmonious. Everyone felt that the blue race objected not because they understood Qinchuan, but because they wanted to refute the red race. Heh, why don't we make a bet? Hong Mang looked at the blue race with a cold gaze. Lan Yu looked at Hong Mang and said calmly, "No problem." "How do you want to bet?" "Let's bet on time. I bet that Qinchuan won't show up until tomorrow at the latest." Hong Mang looked at Lan Yu. "If Qinchuan doesn't show up tomorrow, you win." Lan Yu laughed and said, "No, no, no. If Qinchuan doesn't show up after 5 days, it'll be a draw. I won't take advantage of you." Lan Yu was very confident. No matter how strong Qinchuan was, he couldn't wait until 5 days. After all, Qinchuan was only a newcomer. "What's the bet?" Hong Mang looked at Lan Yu. "I can bet my red eagle." The red hawk was a unique pet of the red race. Although it wasn't very strong, it had outstanding abilities in scouting and alerting. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that every red race member who had a red hawk was the best scout in the world. As long as the red hawk was there, the enemy would have nowhere to hide. Hearing Hong Mang's words, everyone looked at him with shock. It wasn't easy for the red race to raise a mature red eagle. Hong Mang was actually willing to use his red eagle as a bet. This was a huge bet. Although Lan Yu was shocked, he was more happy because he felt that Hong Mang was bound to lose. If he could bring back a mature red eagle, he would definitely become the envy of the rest of the red race. "Since you're so sincere, I'll bet my blue armor." "Wow." Hearing Lan Yu's words, everyone couldn't help but gasp. Blue armor was also a treasure unique to the blue race. It was an excellent protective armor. Unless the opponent was a whole realm higher than the person wearing the armor, it would be very difficult to break through the defense of the armor. This was definitely a huge bet between Lan Yu and Hong Mang. Everyone was looking forward to seeing when Qinchuan would arrive. When the afternoon of the second day arrived, Red Mantis's expression couldn't help but turn gloomy. He didn't have much time left. If Qinchuan still didn't show up in 8 hours, he would have lost half the battle. Unless Qinchuan didn't show up on the 5th day, the red eagle he had raised for 100 years would lose to Lan Yu. Hong Mang, you don't look too good." Lan Yu walked over from the side and smiled at Hong Mang. His gloomy expression seemed to indicate that victory was already within his grasp. Seeing Lan Yu's smile and the sympathetic gazes of the surrounding people, Hong Mang was about to explode in anger. However, in order to maintain his composure and for the sake of the red race's reputation, he could only grit his teeth and pretend to be relaxed. It's just a red eagle. I hope you really are as relaxed as you make yourself out to be." Lan Yu laughed. He was extremely pleased with himself and couldn't help but want to bring the red eagle back to show off. As for whether Qinchuan would still not show up on the 5th day, that wasn't within Lan Yu's consideration. He firmly believed that Qinchuan wouldn't show up on the 5th day. However, reality was just that dramatic. After the 3rd and 4th day that made him feel dejected, a smile appeared on Hong Mang's face again on the night of the 5th day. As for Lan Yu, his expression was extremely ugly. He really didn't think that Qinchuan would be so arrogant. It was already the 5th day and he still hadn't shown up. According to the usual rules, after the 5th day, all the big shots would show up. Qinchuan still hasn't shown up. Does he think he's a big shot too? Lan Yu gnashed his teeth. Not only was it very likely that he would end up in a tie with Hong Mang, but the red eagle that was within his reach had flown away. More importantly, it was because Qinchuan's attitude was truly displeasing. It wasn't just Lan Yu who was displeased. The other overlords were also displeased. Everyone was waiting to see Qinchuan, a young talent, but Qinchuan still hadn't shown up. This attitude of his was a bit too high. Chapter 1198. Since the start of the Overlord gathering, Hong Mang and Lan Yu were not the only ones paying attention to when Qinchuan would arrive. The other overlords, including Sam from the One God sect, were also paying attention to when Qinchuan would arrive. 5 days had passed. Except for some major powers, all the overlords below the late stage of the combination realm had arrived. There were more than 50 of them, but Qinchuan was not among them. This Qinchuan is a little outrageous. The person who spoke was a universe overlord from the red race named Hong Jian. In his opinion, although Qinchuan was powerful, he was still a newcomer among the overlords. He should have arrived 2 days ago. Because of this, Hong Mang thought that Qinchuan would arrive on the 2nd day at the latest. However, 5 days had passed and Qinchuan was still nowhere to be seen. This made Hong Jian a little unhappy. Even the overlords in the early stage and middle stage of the combination realm were here, but Qinchuan was still nowhere to be seen. Did this mean that Qinchuan's status in the celestial cluster was higher than theirs? No matter who it was, they would not like such an arrogant person. Therefore, Hong Jian was not the only one who felt that Qinchuan was outrageous. More or less, the others felt that Qinchuan was putting on airs a little too much this time. Just as everyone was discussing this matter in low voices, the members of the One God sect who had arrived in the 20th district 5 days ago could not sit still anymore. During these 5 days, although the members of the One God sect were not present, they had been paying attention to the overlord gathering. They also thought that Qinchuan should have arrived long ago. However, the reality was that Qinchuan was still nowhere to be seen on the 6th day. Jie came to Sam's room. Seeing Sam sitting quietly on a chair and reading a book, he said in a low voice, "Bishop, it's the 6th day and Qinchuan is still nowhere to be seen." Sam looked at Jie and said, "Aren't there 4 more days?" Jie hesitated for a moment and said, "But I'm worried that Qinchuan knows that we're waiting for him and won't dare to come. Maybe he's already run away." Now that all the members of the One God religion had arrived in Area 20, they did not have any extra manpower in stanzos to keep an eye on Qinchuan. Therefore, they did not know the specific whereabouts of Qinchuan. On the contrary, Qinchuan had a close relationship with the Tian people, so it was not difficult for him to obtain information about them. Therefore, it was very likely that Qinchuan had quietly left stanzos under the cover of the Tian people. If they continued to wait like this, they might not get any result. Sam could understand Tribulation Realm's worries, but he didn't think Qinchuan would run away. So, he calmly said to Tribulation Realm, "Don't worry. Let's keep waiting." Seeing that Sam was not in a hurry, Tribulation Realm could only force himself to calm down and wait patiently. Finally, on the 7th day, Qinchuan arrived. Qinchuan did not bring Lu Zi with him, because Lu Zi was in closed-door cultivation and would not come out until she reached the form synthesis stage. Therefore, only Qinchuan came this time. Compared to the others who were dressed up, Qinchuan's outfit was much simpler. He wore ordinary white casual clothes and a baseball cap, which made Qinchuan look like a tourist on vacation instead of a grand overlord party. When Qinchuan walked into the hall, everyone who was chatting stopped talking at the same time and turned their eyes to Qinchuan, who was standing at the entrance of the hall. After confirming Qinchuan's identity, everyone looked at Qinchuan with surprise. This was because Qinchuan was not at the early stage form synthesis stage as everyone thought, but at the mid-stage form synthesis stage. However, after the surprise, no one showed much enthusiasm for Qinchuan. As if they had discussed it beforehand, everyone withdrew their gazes from Qinchuan and continued their previous conversation. No one wanted to pay attention to Qinchuan at all. Qinchuan did not feel embarrassed at being ignored. He smiled and said loudly, "Everyone, I am Qinchuan." Qinchuan's voice was so loud that it drowned out everyone's voices. Even if someone was talking through voice transmission, they subconsciously stopped and looked at Qinchuan again. This time, everyone looked at Qinchuan with a much sharper gaze and a hint of gloominess. "Qinchuan, you are too presumptuous." The person who spoke was the mid-stage form synthesis stage overlord of the Naga clan, Hai Luo. Although Qin Chuan was also a mid-stage form synthesis stage overlord, as a senior, he felt that he had the right to teach Qin Chuan a lesson. Upon hearing Hai Luo's words, Qin Chuan chuckled and asked Hai Luo, "Who are you?" Hai Luo harumphed coldly and said, "I am the second in command of the Naga clan, Hai Luo." Qin Chuan nodded and said to Hai Luo, "I recall that the Naga clan does not live in the celestial cluster. So what?" Hai Luo looked at Qin Chuan with a strong gaze and said, "Our Naga clan has our own nebula, and we have more than 5 form synthesis stage overlords. We are one of the most powerful forces in the universe. In the universe, in addition to the major star clusters that were ruled by the ancient races, there were many scattered nebulas and even galaxies. The rulers of these places were basically the more powerful races in the universe. There would at least be 1 or 2 overlords in the form synthesis stage in the race. For a race like the Naga race that had 5 overlords in the form synthesis stage, they could indeed be considered one of the most powerful forces in the universe." Qin Chuan smiled at Hai Luo and said indifferently, "I didn't come here today to oppose you. If you don't know what's good for you, then don't blame me for cutting you down." Originally, everyone thought that Qin Chuan would use the power of the Tian people to oppress Hai Luo or tolerate him for the time being. However, no one thought that Qin Chuan's attitude would be even stronger than Hai Luo's. He actually said that Hai Luo did not know what was good for him. These words completely offended Hai Luo. "Brat, you've gone too far." Hai Luo stood up slowly and looked at Qin Chuan gloomily. He said, "If you bow down and admit your mistake now, I can pretend that nothing happened." Upon hearing this, Qin Chuan grinned and said, "I've never bowed down to any opponent, unlike you Naga clan, who are willing to be ordered around by the one god sect like dogs." Originally, everyone was still wondering why Qin Chuan was so strong. Now that they heard Qin Chuan's words, they looked at Hai Luo subtly. It seemed that the Naga clan had turned to the one god sect without anyone knowing. They were charging forward for the one god sect. After being exposed by Qin Chuan, Hai Luo's expression changed slightly. Then, he stretched out a hand towards Qin Chuan and said in a deep voice, "Brat, this is not the place for you to talk nonsense. Kneel down." Chapter 1199. Following Hai Luo's angry roar, a wave appeared out of thin air in the hall and rushed towards Qin Chuan. The wave didn't look very big, only 100 meters tall and 1,000 meters wide. However, the oppressive feeling it gave off was as if they were facing a monstrous wave that could smash a planet to pieces. The power gathered in the wave was so strong that Dongshu stage cultivators would die upon contact. Even an early unification stage cultivator would have to be careful when facing it. Everyone was slightly shocked when they saw this scene. They wanted to see how Qin Chuan would deal with this huge wave. However, what they didn't expect was that Qin Chuan didn't dodge. He stood in place and didn't take any measures to counterattack. It was as if he had given up on resisting and was allowing the wave to drown him. Crash! Everyone could clearly see that Qin Chuan's body had been submerged by the wave. He was bobbing up and down in the waves, waving his hands and struggling. It seemed that he was under great pressure. Hai Luo saw this scene and laughed proudly. "I thought you were very strong. I didn't expect that you couldn't even withstand a mere wave." How laughable! When everyone heard Hai Luo's words, they also felt that Qin Chuan's performance was too unsightly. He didn't seem as strong as the rumors said. Could it be that the rumors were all false? Just as everyone was thinking about this, Qin Chuan, who was struggling in the waves, suddenly calmed down. Then, he grinned at everyone. "I was just teasing you." Qin Chuan's words rang in everyone's ears. Soon after, the wave exploded and turned into a curtain of rain that fell from the sky. Qin Chuan also took advantage of this to break free and stand on the ground again. Crash! The heavy rain poured down. Everyone looked at Qin Chuan with a subtle expression. Who would have thought that Qin Chuan would use such a method to tease everyone? Compared to everyone else, Hai Luo's expression was much uglier. Just a moment ago, he was laughing proudly and felt that Qin Chuan was only SOSO. However, in the next moment, Qin Chuan ruthlessly slapped him in the face. This made him feel a burning pain on his face. Qin Chuan! Hai Luo roared. Just as he was about to attack Qin Chuan again, a bolt of lightning suddenly pierced through the heavy curtain of rain and struck Hai Luo. Under the violent attack of the lightning, Hai Luo was immediately turned into a charred black man. He opened his mouth and let out an extremely mournful scream. Noisy! Qin Chuan frowned slightly. With a wave of his hand, a bolt of lightning appeared above Hai Luo's head out of nowhere and struck Hai Luo. Hai Luo fainted on the spot and his screams came to an abrupt end. Everyone looked at the severely injured and unconscious Hai Luo and then looked at the calm Qin Chuan. Their dissatisfaction and disgust towards Qin Chuan had disappeared and were replaced by vigilance and fear. Hai Luo was a universe overlord who had been famous for a long time. Everyone knew Hai Luo well. Even an overlord at the late stage of the combination realm might not be able to defeat Hai Luo as easily as Qin Chuan did. There were a few people who wanted to find trouble with Qin Chuan, but now they dismissed the idea. They did not want to follow in Hai Luo's footstep. Is there no more? Qin Chuan looked at everyone playfully and said with a smile, Did the One God sect only bribe Hai Luo? Who else is a fighter for the One God sect? You can step forward now. You can come at me together. When everyone heard Qin Chuan's words, they all looked at the people around them. They wanted to see who else had been bribed by the One God sect and was ready to find trouble with Qin Chuan. However, it seemed that Qin Chuan's previous performance was too strong and domineering. At this moment, no one stepped forward and was willing to continue working for the One God sect. Seeing this, Qin Chuan grinned and said to everyone, Since there's no more, I'll find a place to rest. While speaking, Qin Chuan walked towards the sofa, seemingly intending to sit down. At this moment, another group of people walked into the hall, attracting everyone's attention. This new group of people was from the One God sect. Led by red-cloaked Archbishop Sam, a group of 10 people from the One God sect slowly walked into the hall. Except for Sam, who was an overlord at the pinnacle of the combination realm, the other 9 people were all overlords at the late stage of the combination realm. With such a force, the One God sect could wipe out everyone present. Of course, Qin Chuan was an exception. While everyone was paying attention to the One God sect, Qin Chuan acted as if nothing had happened. He walked to the sofa and sat down. Then, he closed his eyes and began to rest. When everyone saw Qin Chuan's behavior, they did not know what to say. It seemed that he was looking down on the One God sect. Qin Chuan ignored the people from the One God sect, but the One God sect would not ignore Qin Chuan. Jie received Sam's signal and slowly walked towards Qin Chuan. Everyone could not help but look forward to seeing this scene. They wanted to see how the One God sect would treat Qin Chuan. Qin Chuan. Jie looked at Qin Chuan expressionlessly. His voice was low and cold. However, Qin Chuan did not seem to hear him. His eyes were still closed, and his expression was calm and relaxed. Seeing Qin Chuan's behavior, Jie was furious and wanted to attack Qin Chuan. However, when he thought of Sam's previous instructions, he had to suppress the anger in his heart and said in a deep voice, Qin Chuan, I'm calling you. Can't you hear me? This time, Qin Chuan finally responded. I heard you, but you are not qualified to talk to me. Get someone else who is qualified to talk to me. The one in red is just right. When Jie heard Qin Chuan's words, he almost went crazy. He was an overlord at the late stage of the combination realm and the high priest of the One God sect. No matter where he went, he would be treated as a distinguished guest. This was the first time he had been looked down upon like this. Jie, come back. Just as the tribulation realm was about to erupt, Sam suddenly spoke and called it back. Jie Jie suppressed the anger in his heart and returned to Sam's side. He gnashed his teeth and said, "Archbishop, this guy is too arrogant." Sam did not speak. He stretched out his hand and patted Jie Jie's shoulder gently. Then, he walked toward Qinchuan. Seeing this, everyone looked at Sam strangely. Who would have thought that the red-cloaked archbishop of the One God sect, who was second only to the Pope, would obediently negotiate with Qinchuan? If this matter were to spread, many people's jaws would drop. Sam walked slowly to Qinchuan's side. He stopped and said indifferently, "I'm Sam, the red-cloaked archbishop of the One God sect." Hearing Sam's words, Qinchuan opened his eyes and looked at him with a playful expression. He said, "You're really obedient." Chapter 1200. No one had expected that Qinchuan would still be so arrogant in front of Sam. He did not take Sam, the red-cloaked archbishop of the One God sect, seriously at all. However, what was even more unexpected was that Sam was extremely calm in the face of Qinchuan's arrogant and despotic attitude. He didn't show any signs of anger at all. Wasn't his ability to maintain his composure a little too powerful? Sam looked at Qinchuan calmly and said indifferently, "You've made great progress. It's amazing." Qinchuan looked at Sam in surprise. He had not expected Sam to be so calm and even be in the mood to praise his talent. This made Qinchuan feel that he was not facing a strong enemy, but a friend. After recovering from his surprise, Qinchuan smiled and asked Sam, "You seem to be very concerned about my progress?" Sam looked at Qinchuan with a subtle gaze and said, "There is no enmity that cannot be resolved. Although many people of the One God sect have died because of you, as long as you sincerely repent, we can all let go of the past and look forward to the future." This time, Qinchuan was really stunned. He had thought of countless possibilities, but he had not expected Sam to be so friendly. He had even taken the initiative to propose to let go of the past and look forward to the future. "Are you really the red-cloaked archbishop of the One God sect?" Qinchuan looked at Sam suspiciously. "Your attitude makes me doubt your identity." Not only was Qinchuan suspicious of Sam's identity, but the onlookers nearby were also stunned by Sam's attitude towards Qinchuan. When did the red-cloaked archbishop of the One God sect become so amiable? In the face of Qinchuan's doubts, Sam pursed his lips and said, "There are some things that you will understand in the future." Upon hearing this, Qinchuan looked deeply at Sam and asked, "So, how do you plan to resolve the enmity between us?" After hearing Qinchuan's words, Sam fell silent for a moment before replying, "As long as you are willing to join the One God sect and become the new great divine son of the One God sect, all the enmity in the past will be forgotten." Qinchuan was once again stunned by Sam's words. Was there such a thing? For a moment, the onlookers looked at Sam strangely. Sam's behavior was not like the usual behavior of the One God sect. It was too strange. Even Jie Jie and the other high priests of the One God religion had looks of disbelief on their faces. What Sam was doing now was completely different from their plan, let alone the others who could not understand Sam. What was going on? Stop joking. Although Sam appeared very sincere, Qinchuan did not believe that the One God sect would be willing to resolve the enmity in this way. Moreover, he had never thought of joining the One God sect. Upon hearing Qinchuan's words, Sam fell silent for a moment before asking, "You don't agree?" Qinchuan nodded and said, "I won't become your great divine son. However, if you are willing to let go of your enmity and stop bothering me, I can coexist peacefully with you." Upon hearing Qinchuan's answer, Sam sighed and said, "I knew you wouldn't agree from the beginning. However, this is the decree of the Pope. I have to obey it unconditionally and try to recruit you. Since you have already rejected it, there is nothing more for us to say." Qinchuan looked at Sam in confusion and asked, "Is it the Pope's idea to recruit me?" The others also looked at Sam in surprise. The Pope actually wanted to recruit Qinchuan? I don't need to explain too much to a dead man. After Qinchuan clearly refused to join the One God sect, Sam's attitude towards Qinchuan took a 180-degree turn. The expression on his face suddenly became cold, and his voice was extremely low and filled with killing intent. Boom! Without any warning, Qinchuan's body seemed to have been hit by a huge hammer. It suddenly crushed the sofa and penetrated the ground with a bang, sinking into the ground. And this was just one or two. Accompanied by a series of low sounds coming from the ground, Qinchuan's body was blasted deeper and deeper into the ground again and again. With every inch he went, the pressure on Qinchuan increased. At this moment, Qinchuan felt as if he was facing the weight of several planets stacked on top of each other. His whole body was about to be crushed. Sizzle! Finally, Qinchuan could no longer passively endure Sam's attacks. He roared and raised his hand to throw a punch. The power of thunder surged out, breaking through the heavy pressure on his body and returning to the ground. Sam stood in place and looked at Qinchuan, who was like the god of thunder, with the power of thunder surging all over his body. His face suddenly darkened. Immediately, a majestic figure descended in the hall, suppressing everyone. Heretic, die! As Sam roared, the majestic figure slowly raised his huge palm and pressed down on Qinchuan's head. Faced with the huge palm pressing down on him, Qinchuan subconsciously wanted to dodge. However, no matter where he appeared, he would always appear under the palm again. It was as if he was going in circles on the spot. Kill! Qinchuan no longer dodged. With a low roar, he used his finger as a sword and slashed at the huge palm. The power of the law of thunder and the powerful sword aura soared into the sky as if it was going to pierce a hole in the sky. Buzz! The huge palm suddenly shone brightly. No matter how sharp Qinchuan's sword aura was or how violent the power of the law of thunder was, it could not shatter the light. Qinchuan could only watch as the huge palm descended on his head. World of wood! Qinchuan roared. A verdant glyph formation suddenly appeared above his head. Countless towering trees grew out of the glyph formation, blocking the huge palm and buying Qinchuan time to breathe. Just as Qinchuan was about to pull away, Sam said indifferently, "Die." As Sam's voice fell, the majestic figure grew infinitely taller, turning into an indomitable giant that broke through the skyscraper. Amidst a violent rumble, he shattered the world of 10,000 trees with a single palm strike. Bang! Under the power of this palm, the earth quaked and the mountains shook. Countless cracks spread out in all directions from where the palm landed. The entire 20th district was affected and showed signs of shattering. If there was another attack like this, there would probably be no 20th district in Stansos from now on. Everyone was shocked by the power of this palm strike. Previously, Sam's attitude towards Qinchuan was so gentle and friendly, but now, Sam's attitude was so overbearing and domineering. This was the true style of the red-cloaked archbishop of the One God sect. Chapter 1201. At this moment, everyone's attention was drawn to this earth-shattering palm. All the overlords present turned pale in the face of this palm. If this palm had been aimed at them, they would have been smashed to smithereens by now. So Qinchuan was already dead? While everyone was shocked and curious about whether Qinchuan was still alive, Sam frowned slightly and looked into the distant sky. There, a figure was looking at him from afar. "Sam, let's go outside and fight." Qinchuan took a deep look at Sam, then turned and flew into space. At this moment, he no longer cared about the rules. The Tian People's Guards wouldn't stop him at this moment. Sam glanced at Qinchuan's departing figure, and the majestic figure behind him slowly dissipated. He tapped his foot lightly and soared into the sky, chasing after Qinchuan. After Sam left, the crowd couldn't sit still any longer. They all flew towards the universe. They didn't want to miss a single detail of such an exciting and intense battle. At the port, Thelon, who had just arrived, couldn't help but sigh when he saw this scene. "We're a step too late." Qin Chuan and Sam have already started fighting. Upon hearing Thelon's words, Sharmila asked worriedly, "Will Qin Chuan be in danger?" Thelon hesitated for a moment before replying, "I can't be sure. After all, Sam is a red-cloaked archbishop. His strength isn't something that ordinary peak combination realm overlords can compare to. Qin Chuan's strength couldn't be measured by common sense. Similarly, Sam's strength couldn't be measured by common sense either. If the two of them clashed, an unprecedented battle would definitely erupt. Let's go and take a look." Sharmila couldn't wait any longer and flew into space first. Qin Chuan's expression turned ugly. Originally, Qin Chuan thought that he would be able to defeat Qin Chuan easily. However, Sam's performance was a huge blow to Qin Chuan's confidence. If he did not have the ability to travel through space, he would have been crippled. There were too many people watching this battle. Qin Chuan had a lot of trump cards that he didn't want to reveal. But if he didn't use them, it would be too difficult for him to beat Sam. Whoosh! While Qin Chuan was deep in thought, a loud noise came from behind him. Sam had caught up and launched an attack. Qin Chuan's attack was very simple. There was nothing fancy about it. He simply used his strength to attack Qin Chuan. However, it was this pure strength that made it difficult for Qin Chuan to resist. It's the same fusion of power, but Sam's fusion of power is obviously higher than mine. At this moment, Qin Chuan had to admit that Sam was really strong. Normally, when a body integration stage overlord cultivator fused their powers together, they would crush them and mix them together. However, Sam's body integration stage fused his powers together by putting them into a machine and crushing them before fusing them together. The degree of fusion was much higher, and it was much more detailed. Although Qin Chuan's fusion of power wasn't bad, it was still inferior to Sam's. As a result, Qin Chuan could only barely resist Sam's attacks. Bang bang bang! Sam kept attacking while Qin Chuan kept defending. The two of them, one attacking and one defending, gradually left Area 20 and entered the universe. When the people behind them saw this scene, they were all very emotional. Qin Chuan could easily defeat Hai Luo, which proved that Qin Chuan was at least a late-stage combination realm overlord, or even a peak combination realm overlord. However, Qin Chuan didn't even have a chance to fight back against Sam. He was crushed by Sam in almost every aspect. At this moment, everyone had to admit that the red-cloaked archbishop of the One God sect was really not to be trifled with. "How long do you think Qin Chuan can last against Sam?" someone suddenly asked. He didn't think Qin Chuan would win. It won't be difficult to determine the winner, but it won't be easy for Sam to kill Qin Chuan. Although everyone agreed that Qin Chuan wasn't a match for Sam, it would still be difficult for Sam to kill Qin Chuan based on their performance. While everyone was talking, Qin Chuan and Sam's battle entered a more intense stage. Sam's goal was to kill Qin Chuan, not defeat Qin Chuan. Therefore, when he saw that he couldn't break through Qin Chuan's defense after a long period of attacks, he summoned his majestic figure again. This time, there were no geographical restrictions. Sam went all out. The one true God Atheist, Dharma idol descend. As Sam's deep voice fell, the one true God Atheist's Dharma idol slowly appeared behind Sam. The Dharma idol was wholly white and wore a white robe that exposed half of its chest and right shoulder. However, it didn't give off a casual feeling. Instead, it gave off a sacred and inviolable feeling. The Dharma idol's face was blurry. No one could see its face clearly. The moment the one true God Atheist's Dharma idol appeared, Qin Chuan felt immense pressure. He knew very well that if he continued to hide his strength, he would definitely die. Therefore, Qin Chuan decided to go all out. "Flipping Sky Seal!" Qin Chuan shouted. He took out the Flipping Sky Seal and formed a seal with both hands. With the help of the Flipping Sky Seal, he used the complete version of the immortal technique Flipping Sky Seal. When a bronze seal the size of a hill appeared in the universe, Qin Chuan directed it toward the one true God Atheus's Dharma idol. Under the attack of the flipping sky seal, the one true God Atheus's Dharma idol didn't move an inch. However, Sam was furious. "How dare you blaspheme the gods? Die!" Sam roared. The one true God Atheus's Dharma idol slowly raised his hand and slapped the flipping sky seal. The powerful force caused cracks to appear on the flipping sky seal. It looked like it would collapse at any time. Qin Chuan saw this and did not hesitate. He took out the 10,000 demons seal again and activated its power to the extreme. 10,000 demons! Roar! Waves of demonic beasts roared. Thousands of demonic beasts rushed out of the 10,000 demons seal and charged toward the one true God Atheus's Dharma idol. They attacked ferociously and were not afraid of sacrificing themselves. With the power of the flipping sky seal and the 10,000 demons seal, Qin Chuan finally managed to restrain the one true God Atheus's Dharma idol. At the same time, Qin Chuan made up his mind to find a way to completely repair the flipping sky seal. The flipping sky seal, which could not exert its full power, was still too weak in a battle of this level. Sam was shocked. He had not expected Qin Chuan to have a way to restrain the one true God Atheus's Dharma idol. However, Sam had more tricks up his sleeve. He took out a golden scepter and pointed it at Qin Chuan. In a low voice he said, "Disaster descends." Chapter 1202. Disaster is coming. Qin Chuan had a bad premonition when he heard Sam's words. The next moment, he felt discomfort in his body. He felt dizzy, and yellow snot flowed out of his nose. "Achoo!" Qin Chuan sneezed, and then his entire body trembled. He actually started to tremble. This was enough to prove that Qin Chuan had caught a cold, and at the same time, a slight fever. Qin Chuan was shocked. Even a cultivator in the qi refining stage would not suffer from this illness, but he, an overlord of the universe, was suffering from it. "Achoo!" Qin Chuan could not help but sneeze again. This time, a large ball of snot was sneezed out, but soon, new snot flowed out. Whoosh! Sam's figure suddenly appeared in front of Qin Chuan. He waved the scepter in his hand and hit Qin Chuan hard, sending Qin Chuan flying. Cough, cough, cough. Qin Chuan retreated, coughing uncontrollably. Every time he coughed, it was as if he was going to cough out his lungs. This illness had weakened his body rapidly, and he could only use less than 70% of his strength. If he had not experienced it himself, Qin Chuan would never have believed that such a small illness could have such a huge impact on him. Just as Qin Chuan was thinking about this, Sam attacked again. A powerful force hit Qin Chuan's chest. Qin Chuan instinctively wanted to block, but his illness had slowed down his reaction, and he could not block Sam's attack. Bang! Qin Chuan was sent flying again. This time, his chest was almost pierced, and his sternum was caved in. "Damn it, I can't let this continue." Achoo! Qin Chuan sneezed, and the pain in his chest multiplied. The veins on Qin Chuan's temples bulged, and his expression became extremely ferocious. "Rainbow light!" Qin Chuan growled. He raised his hand and wanted to inscribe a talisman array. However, after a shudder, the talisman characters he drew were wrong. In the distance, Sam sneered when he saw this scene, and he said, "Give up. You're plagued by calamity, and nothing will go smoothly for you." As he spoke, Sam waved the scepter in his hand again, and a wave of energy surged out, pressing towards Qin Chuan. Qin Chuan gritted his teeth and dodged the attack with thunder elemental evasion. He stopped inscribing runes and instead used space traversal to approach Qin Chuan. He held Leifa in his hand and wanted to counterattack. But to his surprise, Qin Chuan missed. To be more precise, it should be Qin Chuan's space traversing technique that had gone awry. Bang! Sam punched Qin Chuan's abdomen and sent him flying. He said coldly, "I've said it before. You're plagued by calamities. Nothing will go smoothly for you. Give up struggling. Qin Chuan clenched his teeth, but unexpectedly, one of his teeth was crushed. With a cracking sound, Qin Chuan immediately opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood that was wrapped around his broken teeth. Qin Chuan sucked in a breath of cold air. He was furious. This calamity was even more terrifying than when he faced Province. Game over. Sam looked at Qin Chuan with a deep gaze. He was ready to end this boring battle. He raised the scepter in his hand and shouted, "Divine punishment from the heavens!" As soon as Sam finished speaking, Qin Chuan immediately felt a strong sense of danger. He looked up and saw a huge golden scepter suddenly appear above Qin Chuan's head. It was like a sharp sword, piercing towards Qin Chuan. Roar! At the critical moment, Qin Chuan couldn't endure it any longer. His figure abruptly turned, and he suddenly transformed into an enormous golden dragon. The divine dragon swung its tail, and it knocked the incoming scepter flying. The dragon's roar was earth-shattering and intimidating. Dragon! A true dragon! Everyone looked at Qin Chuan, who had suddenly transformed into a dragon, and was deeply shocked. Even Thelon and Sharmila, who knew Qin Chuan well, were shocked. Wasn't Qin Chuan a human? How could he transform into a true dragon? Dragon! Is Qin Chuan a dragon? Sharmila exclaimed. The golden dragon in front of her was very real. This was definitely not an illusion. He is indeed a dragon. But how could he be a dragon? Seeing Qin Chuan transform into the legendary golden dragon, Thelon did not know how to describe his current feelings. The impact on his mind was too great. As for the others, they could not help but doubt their own eyes. They suspected that they had fallen into an illusion. Otherwise, how could they suddenly see a true dragon that had disappeared for countless years? A legendary creature suddenly appeared like this. It was too exciting. Dragon? As Qin Chuan's opponent, Samar had thought about how Qin Chuan would retaliate. However, he never expected Qin Chuan to transform into a dragon, and a true dragon at that. Roar! Qin Chuan did not answer Samar's question. At this time, he, who had transformed into a true dragon, used the power of the true dragon bloodline to break through the entanglement of Calamity's descent. He immediately spat a ball of dragon's breath at Samar. This dragon's breath was no longer blue. Instead, it was pure gold. It contained a powerful mutated power of golden lightning. It was like a lightning tribulation, and its power was shocking. Samar did not dare to let his guard down in the face of Qin Chuan's counterattack. He used the scepter in his hand to attack the dragon's breath from afar. However, his attacks were useless in the face of this dragon's breath. They were all defeated. Samar had no choice but to channel his power into the one true god Atheus's Dharma power to resist the dragon's breath. Boom! The dragon's breath came into contact with the one true god Atheus's Dharma power and exploded. Countless golden lightning bolts wreaked havoc, showing signs of destroying one of the one true god Atheus's Dharma power's palms. With the cyclic sky seal and the 10,000 goblin seal in front of him and the dragon's breath attack from behind, the one true god Atheus's Dharma power was no longer strong. Instead, it was at a disadvantage. This made Samar's expression turn gloomy. He had not thought that dealing with one Qin Chuan would be so troublesome. Samar glanced at the golden scepter in his hand. A hint of reluctance flashed across his eyes. However, it was quickly replaced by determination. He raised the golden scepter in his hand again, and said in a low voice, "Divine power! Break all spells!" As soon as Samar's voice fell, a golden light suddenly rushed out of the golden scepter. This golden light was filled with the brilliance and greatness of divinity. It easily defeated the combined power of the cyclic sky seal and the 10,000 goblin seal. The cyclic sky seal and the 10,000 goblin seal spirituality were damaged, and they could no longer participate in the battle. However, at the same time, the golden scepter in Samar's hand became ordinary. It was no longer like before, when there was divinity flowing around it. Samur sacrificed the golden scepter that had been with him for many years. It was a symbol of his status as a red cardinal that had been given to him by the Pope. He had once again turned the tables. Chapter 1203. Qin Chuan withdrew the 10,000 demons seal and the flipping sky seal. He frowned and looked at the two seals that had been damaged. He then looked at Sam and the Dharma form of the one true God, Atheist, standing behind him. He had to admit that he had seriously underestimated Sam's combat power. No wonder you're one of the only 12 cardinals in the One God sect. You're really something. Qin Chuan looked deeply at Sam. Then, he opened his dragon mouth and spat out a ball of golden light at Sam. Heavenly light. At this moment, Qin Chuan used the heavenly light that he had cast with the help of the true dragon bloodline. It was much more powerful than before. It was so powerful that one could not look directly at it. In the face of Qin Chuan's powerful attack, Sam's face darkened. He said coldly, "Slash." Following Sam's shout, the Dharma form of the one true God, Atheist, slowly raised its hand. It seemed to move very slowly, but it reached first and blocked the heavenly light with its palm. Then, the heavenly light suddenly exploded, turning into countless rays of truth that scattered in all directions like fireworks. Then, it suddenly changed direction and shot at Sam. Seeing this scene, Sam's expression turned cold. He put his palms together and said in a low voice, "Ineffective! Ineffective! Ineffective! Ineffective!" The rays of heavenly light that were shooting at Sam suddenly dissipated when they were about to reach him. At the same time, Sam's face suddenly turned pale, and his breathing became chaotic. Obviously, he had paid a price to block the heavenly light. Qin Chuan saw this and frowned deeply. Is it the absolute command again? Qin Chuan had experienced the power of the absolute command before. However, at that time, he was facing Province. Compared to Sam, Province was still too inexperienced and could not fully display the power of the absolute command. This time, I won't give you another chance. Qin Chuan opened his mouth again and spat out a silver sword light. This time, his target was not Sam, but the Dharma form of the one true God, Atheist. He wanted to shatter the Dharma form before killing Sam. The might of the heavenly sword was unstoppable. Sam looked coldly at the incoming sky sword and said in a low voice, "Dharma power, return to normal." Words were law. The only true God Atheist's Dharma idol, which had already consumed a large amount of energy, once again became strong after hearing Sam's words. He returned to his peak state and put his palms together, clamping the heavenly sword between them. Whoosh! The heavenly sword didn't advance any further. Instead, it abruptly erupted with boundless sword chi that shot toward the manifestation of the one true God Atheist. Every single sword chi was imbued with the God's sword intent that had already reached grand completion. 1. Above the Dharma idol of the only true God, Ares, a pale white light suddenly shot out, blocking the sword chi that was shooting towards him. Seeing this, Sam relaxed a little. As long as the Dharma idol of the only true God, Atheist, was not destroyed, he would be invincible. Just as Sam was thinking about this, a pitch-black cave suddenly appeared in front of him. The next moment, a huge golden dragon claw brazenly slashed out and accurately grabbed Sam's body. When his body was suddenly grabbed by the dragon claw, Sam's expression changed drastically. Just as he was about to speak, the dragon claw's force on his body suddenly increased. He couldn't help but cry out in pain. The words that were on the tip of his tongue couldn't leave his mouth. At this time, Sam still didn't realize that this was his last chance to use the words of law. The dragon claw dragged Sam into an alternate space. However, unexpectedly, Qin Chuan didn't drag Sam out from the other side. He actually threw Sam into the alternate space and only retracted his dragon claw. When the spatial door closed, the connection between the manifestation of the one true God, atheist, and Sam was cut off. Kill! Qin Chuan let out a low growl, opened his mouth, and spat out several balls of dragon breath at the avatar of the only true god, Ares. Then, his huge dragon body rushed forward with all his might, pouncing straight at the avatar of the only true god, Ares. Raising his dragon claws, he viciously clawed at the avatar's face. At this moment, although the manifestation didn't have a face, everyone could feel its anger. The anger of the one true god, atheist. Bang. Without the support of Sam's power, the manifestation of the one true god, atheist, became a rootless duckweed. Under Qin Chuan's fierce attacks, it turned into nothingness. At the same time that the manifestation of the one true god, atheist, was destroyed, a nearby space suddenly shattered. Sam rushed out in a sorry state, screaming hysterically, "No!" Pooh. The heavenly sword, now free of its restraints, changed its direction and locked onto Sam. In an instant it pierced through Sam's chest. Sword chi, reinforced by sword intent, instantly exploded in Sam's body, killing without restraint. Cough, cough. Cough, cough. Sam coughed out large mouthfuls of blood, but he ignored the injuries in his body. His eyes were fixed on Qin Chuan, and the hatred and killing intent in his eyes overflowed to the heavens. Qin Chuan! With a furious roar that resounded through the universe, Red Archbishop Sam perished on the spot. Qin Chuan transformed into his human form and stood in the air. Looking at Sam's lifeless body, a deep look flashed across his eyes. The battle was over. Qin Chuan had won the battle once again, but this time, Qin Chuan felt more tired than ever. He was really tired. He had used almost all of his means except for the runic sword to finally defeat Sam in a way that was close to cheating. If he didn't have the inspiration to place Samo in a different space and fight for the opportunity to destroy the Dharma of the only true god, Ares, this battle might not have ended until now, unless he used all his trump cards. But if it really came to this step, his deterrence to the outside world would be greatly reduced, which was not a situation he wanted to see. When Sam rushed out of the alternate space, he had a chance to escape or continue the battle. However, the destruction of the manifestation of the one true god, atheist, had a great impact on Sam's spiritual world, and Qin Chuan had seized the opportunity. If not for this, Sam would have put down his pride and ordered the members of the one true god sect to swarm Qin Chuan, and Qin Chuan would have been in trouble. However, these were all afterthoughts. They were just hypotheticals. Qin Chuan! Jie roared angrily. His eyes were about to pop out of their socket. He had never thought that Qin Chuan would actually kill Sam. In the face of Jie's anger, Qin Chuan glanced at him indifferently and said indifferently, "If you don't want to die, you'd better shut your mouth." Sam was dead, so it did not matter whether he killed the others. After all, he did not want to completely fall out with the one true god sect. Well, although he had killed many people from the one true god sect, Qin Chuan believed that as long as the Pope of the one true god sect was not stupid, he would know what to do. A torn face could still be stitched up, although it would be a little ugly. Chapter 1204. Faced with the threat of death, Jie's throat seemed to be blocked by a mysterious force. He could no longer say a word. He did not want to die. Great fear shrouded Jie, including the other high priests. No one wanted to die, so they chose to remain silent. In the face of Qin Chuan's terrifying strength, they were really afraid. At this time, the people who were watching the whole process of the battle from afar had extremely strange expressions on their faces after seeing the performance of Jie and the high priests of the One God religion. Ever since Qin Chuan and the One God religion came into contact, the religion had lost a large number of elites to Qin Chuan. Now, with the addition of a red-cloaked archbishop, the people of the One God religion were afraid of Qin Chuan. After this battle, if the One God religion wanted to find trouble with Qin Chuan again, they would have to think twice. If they lost any more high-end combat forces, the One God religion's dominance in the Deus cluster would be shaken. Before seeing the final result of the battle, no one was optimistic about Qin Chuan. This was because the red-cloaked archbishop was too famous and Sam's performance was too strong. However, Qin Chuan won and killed Sam in a fair and square one-on-one battle. At the same time, everyone finally understood why Qin Chuan could fight above his level and why his combat strength was so strong despite his low realm. These things might be unbelievable if they happened to ordinary people, but if they happened to a real dragon, it was not so hard to understand. A real dragon. However, when they thought of Qin Chuan's true identity and the figure of the golden dragon, they could not help but look at Qin Chuan with awe. They believed that after the news of this battle spread, it would definitely cause a huge sensation. The leader of the demon race, the true dragon race, who had disappeared for countless years, had appeared again. Qin Chuan slowly walked in front of Jiejie. Looking at the frightened and desperate expression on Jiejie's face, he smiled faintly and said, "Don't worry, I won't kill you or the rest of you." Hearing Qin Chuan's words, Jiejie suppressed the fear in his heart and asked in a trembling voice, "What do you want to do?" "I want to trouble you to help me pass a message to your Pope, Saint Baudelaire." Qin Chuan looked at Jiejie with a subtle gaze and said, "Please tell him that whether this matter ends here or not, it's up to him." Jiejie was slightly stunned when he heard this. From Qin Chuan's words, it was not difficult for him to understand that Qin Chuan did not want to be enemies with the One God sect. However, in this case, why did Qin Chuan repeatedly kill people from the One God sect? Qin Chuan saw the doubts in Jiejie's heart. He laughed and said, "When I was on the celestial planet, it was the One God sect that changed the rules of the exchange meeting. I killed province within the scope of the rules. I did not do anything wrong, but the One God sect was relentless and wanted to make trouble for me. I had no choice but to fight back, didn't I?" Hearing Qin Chuan's words, Jiejie's expression suddenly became very interesting. "So, you were forced to kill hundreds of divine envoys, more than 20 combination overlords, and a red-cloaked archbishop of the One God sect? Being forced to do so was really impressive." Jiejie was madly ridiculing Qin Chuan in his heart, but in fact, he did not dare to say a word. He was afraid that Qin Chuan would be forced to do so again. Qin Chuan looked at Jiejie meaningfully and said indifferently, "In the past, the One God sect bullied me because I was weak and you thought that I was unable to resist. Now that I have shown my strength, if you still want to kill me, you are welcome to find me at any time. But remember, before you find me, you have to be prepared to have your teeth broken by me." Jiejie's face showed a touch of bitterness when he heard this. He said, "I know. I will pass on your words to His Holiness." Qin Chuan nodded gently and said to Jiejie, "Then let's go. Leave Stansos before I change my mind." Jiejie hesitated for a moment and said, "I want to collect the archbishop's corpse." Qin Chuan smiled and said, "Go ahead." Under Jiejie's lead, the One God sect left in a hurry after collecting Sam's corpse. At this point, the battle had completely come to an end. "You're really amazing." Thelon looked at Qin Chuan with an extremely complicated expression. Qin Chuan's strength had completely exceeded his expectations. He was really too strong. Qin Chuan smiled and asked Thelon, "After this battle, can your overlord's gathering still go on?" "It can't go on." Thelon smiled bitterly and said, "Everyone's mind is no longer on the gathering. Now you are the center of their attention. A true dragon, I really didn't expect you to be a true dragon." Qin Chuan pondered for a moment and then said to Thelon, "Strictly speaking, I am a human. However, I do have the blood of a true dragon in my body. I don't deny this." Now, there was no need to continue hiding many things, so Qin Chuan admitted his identity to Thelon very frankly. After hearing Qin Chuan's words, Thelon looked at Qinchuan subtly and said, "Whether you are a true dragon or a human, your strength is obvious to all. Moreover, the elders sent me a message. They hope to formally form an alliance with you." In the past, Qinchuan had shown great talent. However, before Qinchuan realized his talent and strength, the Tian people did not think highly of Qinchuan. Now that Qinchuan had reached the form synthesis stage and killed Sam, he proved to everyone that he had the strength to stand at the top of the pyramid. Therefore, the Tian people were willing to formally form an alliance with Qinchuan and advance and retreat together. Faced with the Tian people's kindness, Qinchuan smiled and shook his head. "No, it is not me who is forming an alliance with you. It is the human race and the demon race who are forming an alliance with you Tian people." Qinchuan pointed at himself and said, "I am a member of the human race. Similarly, I am also a member of the demon race." Since ancient times, the human race and the demon race had been allies. With Qinchuan's special identity, he could represent the human race and the demon race. Moreover, he did not particularly need the goodwill of the Tian people. The human race and the demon race were the ones who really needed the goodwill of the Tian people. After hearing Qinchuan's words, Thelon looked deeply at Qinchuan and said, "I know what you mean. Now let me correct it. The Tian people hope to form an alliance with the human race and the demon race. What do you think?" Hearing this, Qinchuan smiled happily and reached out his hand to Thelon, saying, "Then, we are comrades in arms from now on." Thelon smiled and shook hands with Qinchuan, saying, "Comrade in arms, I think highly of you." Chapter 1205. Although the battle between Qinchuan and Sam had already come to an end, its influence had only just begun to ferment. Although there weren't many people present to watch the battle, it didn't prevent those who heard the news from using their rich imagination to recreate the scene. Especially regarding the image of the golden dragon, countless people sighed and regretted not being able to see that wonderful scene. In today's celestial cluster, and even in other distant places, any forces with a little information channel had already heard about this battle. This battle made everyone remember the name Qinchuan. Soon, the Tian people announced a shocking piece of news to the entire universe. The Tian people would officially form an alliance with the ancient humans and ancient demons. This news shocked the entire universe. At this time, all forces had realized that this battle was not only the battle that made Qinchuan famous, but also the battle where the ancient humans and ancient demons announced their strong return. Deus Cluster, the only cathedral of the Divine King's continent. Saint Bodol stood in front of the only statue of the one true God, Atheus, with a cold expression. "Your Holiness, Sam has fallen." Cardinal Gale, who was standing behind Saint Bodol, looked at Saint Bodol's back with a complicated expression. During this period of time, the one God religion had suffered too many blows. Saint Bodol didn't respond to Gale's words. He was silent, and his eyes never left the statue of the one true God, Atheus. Seeing that Saint Bodol didn't speak, Gale said in a deep voice, "Pope, I am willing to avenge Sam and restore the reputation of the one God religion." This time, Saint Bodol finally responded. He slowly turned around, looked at Gale, and asked, "How much stronger are you compared to Sam?" Gale was slightly taken aback when he heard Saint Bodol's words, and then said in a deep voice, "Pope, I am willing to die to protect the reputation of the one God religion." "You may die, but he may not." Saint Bodol said faintly, "Didn't you hear what he asked the high priest to bring back from Jie?" Gale became anxious and said loudly, "But, he is threatening the one God religion, threatening you, and even threatening the one true God. If we tolerate him like this, it will cause great damage to the reputation of the Church." Saint Bodol sighed and said, "I understand what you are saying, and I also understand that you have good intentions, but some things don't work that way. The one God sect's current status is inseparable from the 12 archbishop. The loss of each archbishop is heavy and extremely painful for the One God sect. Saint Bartolo took a deep look at Jiao Lu and said, "So, unless it's a last resort, I don't want any of you to fall." 2. Unfortunately, we didn't have the foresight we have now. Saint Bartol said to Gale in a subtle tone, "Let go of this hatred for the time being, and don't find trouble with him. Everything can wait until later." Although Gale was very unwilling to accept Saint Bartol's order, he could only swallow his anger and whisper, "I understand." After Gale left, Saint Bartol slowly turned around and looked at the statue of the one true God Atheist. He murmured, "Actually, I can't take this lying down either, but this is God's will. We have no choice but to obey." While all parties were discussing the matter of Qinchuan killing Sam, Qinchuan and Knight Serenity had already arrived at Tron Nebula through the Tian people's teleportation formation and arrived at Tron City. The originally bustling Tron City had now completely turned into a ghost town. When Qinchuan and Knight Serenity arrived, they did not notice any signs of life in Tron City. Even the scavengers did not visit Tron City. Knight Serenity looked at the dilapidated city under his feet and whispered to Qinchuan, "Is this Tron City?" Qinchuan nodded and said, "Yes, but from now on, this place is no longer called Tron City. Its new name is the Starting Point." While speaking, Qinchuan raised his hand and tapped lightly. A vast array glyph appeared in the air, and a vast ocean poured down from the sky, completely cleaning the entire Tron City from the inside out. When the ocean current mixed with all kinds of garbage was compressed by Qinchuan and then thrown into the different space, what appeared in front of Qinchuan and Knight Serenity was a clean, spotless, brand new city. Its name was the Starting Point. After the human race and the demon race returned to the universe, it was a new starting point. After doing all this, Qinchuan said to Knight Serenity, "For the next few days, stay here and wait for me to come back." Knight Serenity nodded and said to Qinchuan, "I will guard our starting point well." After briefing Knight Serenity, Qinchuan set off for the Dark Universe in search of the Banished Land. Although various high-tech products could no longer be used in the Dark Universe, Qinchuan could rely on his connection with Bai Yu and Mysterious Snake to find the way. Qinchuan did not take a spaceship, but directly traveled through space. In just half a day, he returned to the sane galaxy. At the same time, a subtle connection appeared between him, Bai Yu, and Mysterious Snake. Qinchuan went straight into the Dark Universe. After a few days, he finally saw the Hope in space. At this time, Bai Yu and Mysterious Snake were standing on the Hope's deck, looking at Qinchuan from afar and welcoming Qinchuan's arrival. "Thank you for your hard work." Qinchuan came to the Hope's deck and smiled at Bai Yu and Mysterious Snake. "Not at all." Bai Yu smiled at Qinchuan and said, "Congratulations on reaching the body fusion stage and becoming a universe overlord. However, I feel that you're not just at the early stage of the body fusion stage." Mid-stage body fusion. Mysterious Snake looked at Qinchuan and sighed. "I didn't expect Master to reach the mid-stage of the body fusion stage in less than a year. That's amazing." Qinchuan accepted Bai Yu and Mysterious Snake's congratulations with a smile. Then, he turned his gaze to a dark space not far away. He could clearly feel that there was a small interstellar port under this dark space. It was called the Air Center. "It's been a long time." Qinchuan sighed. Roughly speaking, it had been 15 or 16 years since he left this place. It felt like it had passed in the blink of an eye. "Let's go back." Bai Yu looked at Qinchuan expectantly. "They still don't know of our arrival. I think this will be a great surprise." Chapter 1206. It had been almost half a year since Zerg retreated. Zerg had not returned, and the center of Kunlun's field gradually regained its former peace. As the Alliance's commander-in-chief, Chen Chongqing had been stationed at the center of Kunlun's field. He stood on a tall building and looked at the city that had been rebuilt and restored to its original state. Other than feeling relieved, he was more worried. He had never believed that the insectoids would retreat so easily. He believed that when the insectoids came again, the threat they would face would be greater than any of the previous times. However, he didn't tell anyone about these worries, because he didn't want to affect everyone's good mood. Zerg, oh Zerg, when will you all die? If there was one person in the world who wanted Zerg to die the most, it would be Chen Chongqing. He hated Zerg and wanted to trade his life for his. Buzz. Right when Chen Chongqing was sighing with emotion, a pitch-black spatial door suddenly appeared behind him. Chen Chongqing immediately turned around to look behind him when he noticed the abnormality behind him, and his expression changed drastically when he saw the pitch-black spatial door. Enemy attack! Chen Chongqing subconsciously roared and passed the message to his companions around him. Whoosh! Long Xiao and Bluepole's figures approached from afar and quickly landed beside Chen Chongqing. They stared at the dark portal in front of them vigilantly and were ready to attack at any time. What is this? Zerg's portal? Bluepole frowned and asked Chen Chongqing. Chen Chongqing shook his head and said, I'm not sure either. This thing appeared suddenly without any warning, but I'm guessing it has something to do with Zerg. As Chen Chongqing spoke, more and more people had gathered and surrounded the dark portal. The center of Kunlun's field, which had been quiet for half a year, was running like a war machine. Everyone was ready to defend against Zerg's invasion. Just as everyone was focused on the pitch-black spatial portal and was on guard against the Zergs that could appear at any time, a fair and clean hand suddenly reached out from it. Then, a delicate and cute figure jumped out from it. Baiyu looked at the people around her in astonishment. Her expression was slightly awkward. They had been discovered? Seeing Baiyu standing there, Chen Chongqing was stunned. Bluepool and Long Xiao were also stunned. They couldn't have mistaken that familiar face and figure. Baiyu, is that you? Chen Chongqing couldn't help but feel excited and nervous. He was worried that he had seen wrongly and recognized the wrong person. Baiyu smiled and said to Chen Chongqing and everyone else, Hello everyone, we are back. Hearing Baiyu's familiar voice, Long Zhao's eyes turned red and he shouted excitedly, Baiyu! It really is Baiyu! He said we? Bluepole's eyes widened as he asked agitatedly, Is there someone else? Who else? Involuntarily, a name popped up in everyone's mind. Under everyone's excited and expectant gazes, a tall figure slowly walked out of the space portal. He smiled and waved at everyone. Hi, long time no see. I, Qinchuan, am back. When Baiyu appeared, many people didn't recognize her. However, when Qinchuan appeared, everyone recognized Qinchuan. They recognized the man who had once saved the Star Dragon Federation by himself, turned the tide, and completely defeated Zerg's Crimson Army. Qinchuan, the man who had left the land of exile for 15 years, was back. Boss. Chen Chongqing stepped forward and hugged Qinchuan tightly. He was very excited and happy to finally see Qinchuan again, to see Boss. At this moment, everyone who was familiar with Qinchuan came forward, wanting to give Qinchuan a warm hug after a long separation. In the past, many ancestors had left the land of exile, but Qinchuan was the first person who could return from the outside. Don't cry, what do you look like? Qinchuan looked at the crying Chen Chongqing and couldn't help but tear up. His brother from 15 years ago was still his good brother now. Welcome back. Long Xiao hugged Baiyu, choking with tears and smiling. She was really happy. Qinchuan grinned at Long Xiao and said, You've become more mature and beautiful. Where's Lu Zi? Long Xiao looked at Qinchuan and hesitated. Why didn't she come back? Qinchuan knew that Long Xiao was worried about Lu Zi. He smiled and replied, Don't worry, she's fine. She's in seclusion, so she didn't come back this time. Hearing Qinchuan's words, Long Xiao let out a long sigh of relief. As long as she was fine, everything was fine. Okay, don't cry. Qin Chuan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He pushed Chen Chongqing away and said, "You beat him up so badly. Why are you still crying?" "Boss, I just miss you. You don't know how hard it's been for me all these years." Chen Chongqing was crying very hard. He was really happy to be able to see Qin Chuan again. All these years, he had carried too many burdens and was constantly under heavy pressure. At this moment, the emotions that had been suppressed in his heart were all released, and he felt much more relaxed. Long Xiao looked at Chen Chongqing, who was crying like a child, and pursed her lips. She said to Qin Chuan, "These years, Chongqing has been at the center of the Kunlun heirs, the front line against Zerg's invasion. It's been really hard." Qin Chuan heard this and patted Chen Chongqing's shoulder lightly. "It's been hard on you." Chen Chongqing smiled through his tears and said to Qin Chuan, "Boss, with your words, it's not hard at all. Okay, hurry up and organize your emotions. Don't make a fool of yourself in front of everyone." Qin Chuan chuckled and looked at the others. "Everyone can relax. We don't have to worry about Zerg's invasion for now. Someone is guarding outside for us." This time, Mysterious Snake didn't come in. Qin Chuan planned to call him back when they left the center of the Kunlun heirs and went to Dragon Valley. Hearing Qin Chuan's words, Long Xiao suddenly asked, "Qin Chuan, half a year ago, did you guys defeat Zerg's invasion?" Qin Chuan glanced at Bai Yu and smiled. "At that time, I wasn't back yet. It was Bai Yu who killed all the insectoid." Hearing Qin Chuan's answer, Long Xiao was stunned. She said, "There were so many Zerg. Bai Yu alone was enough?" Speaking of this, Long Xiao asked again, "What are your realms now?" Qin Chuan and Bai Yu's realms were suppressed by the special laws of heaven and earth in the banished land. They were already at the perfect nascent soul realm. However, Long Xiao could feel that Qin Chuan and Bai Yu's strength was definitely far beyond that. Chapter 1207. All of them shot their gazes towards Qin Chuan and Bai Yu when they heard Long Xiao's question. In their hearts, they felt that since Qin Chuan and Bai Yu had left the lands of exile for over 15 years, their cultivations should have advanced to the legendary soul transformation realm, right? When Qin Chuan heard this, he smiled and said to Long Xiao, "This question is rather complicated. I won't be able to explain it to you in a short time. Let's leave this place first. I'll patiently answer your questions later." Hearing Qin Chuan's words, everyone stopped asking. Under Chen Chongqing's lead, they crowded around Qin Chuan to the command center. After everyone was seated, Qin Chuan began to ask about the changes that had happened in the banished lands over the years. From Chen Chongqing's description, Qin Chuan learned that after he left, everyone had been recuperating. It wasn't until the 6th year that Zerg's invasion came again. In that battle, although they won, the Ancient Ones, Shimen Weiyang and Qin Fenghua died in battle. Qian Wujin and Yi Ting were heavily injured. After that, after another period of recuperation, Chen Chongqing and the others grew up and became the new pillars of the Star Dragon Federation and the Yao realm. 4 years ago, Qian Wujin's old illness acted up and he died. Yi Ting chose to leave the banished lands and seek a chance of survival in the outside world. After that, Zerg's invasion came again. This battle lasted for about 3 years and only stopped half a year ago. Hearing Chen Chongqing's words, Qin Chuan understood that the person captured by Zerg must be Yi Ting. After a brief understanding of these matters, Qin Chuan didn't ask too many questions. He decided to return to the Star Dragon Federation personally and see how the Star Dragon Federation had developed. Buzz. In the clear sky, a spatial door suddenly appeared. The Hope slowly flew out and stopped in the sky above the elf city. Qin Chuan stood on the deck and looked down at the elven city below him. His emotions were extremely complicated, and he felt as if he was dreaming of the past. It was as if he had once again become that youth who had just entered the Elven City and was about to participate in the Black Moon Combat Academy's entrance exam. He was filled with beautiful longing for the future. The Black Moon Combat Academy has been rebuilt on the original site of the Black Moon Mountain Range. Teacher Ningya has become the headmaster, while Teacher Su Yuluo is the vice-headmaster. Right now, the Black Moon Combat Academy is the university that all youths yearn for. It is the undisputed #1 in Star Dragon. Chen Chongqing was very happy as he introduced the Black Moon Combat Academy to Qinchuan. Qinchuan's influence could not be ignored. Hearing Chen Chongqing's words, Qinchuan smiled and said, "You guys take your time. I'll go see teacher first." As he spoke, Qinchuan's figure disappeared. Seeing this, Chen Chongqing was shocked. What kind of movement technique was this? Wasn't his speed a little too fast? When the Crimson General Kargad had broken through the seal, the Azure Ancient City had been destroyed. Although the city that had been rebuilt was modeled after the Azure Ancient City, it no longer had the ancient charm of the past. Even so, some people preferred the current Azure Ancient City because they could see a kind of tenacity in the new city. As the headmaster of the Black Moon Combat Academy, Ningya's favorite thing to do every day was to lie quietly on the balcony and bask in the sun. When it rained, she would read in the library, organize the books, and do the cleaning. Although these things were trivial, she liked to do them alone and was unwilling to let anyone interfere. On this day, the sun was shining brightly. Ningya hugged a book and lay on the balcony chair with her eyes slightly closed, enjoying the peaceful afternoon. Without a sound, Qinchuan's figure appeared on the balcony and stood beside Ningya. Although more than 10 years had passed, the Ningya in front of him and the Ningya in Qinchuan's memories had not changed at all. She was still as beautiful and charming as before. She always liked to wear well-tailored cheongsams that accentuated her exquisite figure incisively and vividly. Sensing something, Ningya slowly opened her eyes and looked at Qinchuan, who was standing beside her. When she saw the familiar face that had appeared countless times in her dreams, Ningya was stunned. Was this an illusion? Or was this a dream? Ningya stared blankly at Qinchuan until a smile appeared on Qinchuan's face. Only then did she realize that this was not an illusion. "Teacher, I'm back." Hearing this kind and familiar greeting, Ningya pursed her lips and softly said, "Massage my shoulders." "Okay." Qinchuan smiled and walked behind Ningya. He gently put his hands on Ningya's shoulders and began to massage gently. He could feel that Ningya's shoulders were trembling slightly. Ningya cried, but she didn't want Qinchuan to see her crying. She felt that it was ugly. She wanted to maintain her dignity as a teacher. "Teacher, if you want to cry, just cry loudly." Qinchuan smiled and said to Ningya, "Actually, I also want to cry. After so many years, you're still the same. You haven't changed at all. It's really great." Hearing Qinchuan's words, Ningya finally couldn't help sobbing. She whispered, "You brat, you still know to come back." Qinchuan squatted down beside Ningya and smiled at her crying face. He said, "Teacher, I'm sorry. I made you worry. Look at you smiling so happily. You don't look guilty at all." Ningya looked at Qinchuan's shameless appearance and couldn't help but smile through her tears. Today was a good day to be happy. She couldn't cry. It was inauspicious. "Now that you're back, are you still leaving?" Ningya held Qinchuan's hand and looked at Qinchuan kindly as if she was looking at her own son. Qinchuan nodded and said, "Yes, but not alone. I want to take everyone away from here and go to the outside world." Hearing Qinchuan's words, Ningya was a little curious and asked, "What's the outside world like?" Although Ningya had seen some records about the outside world in the library left behind by Ning Zhongtian, those records were vague. Most of the time, she had to rely on her own imagination. Ningya tried very hard, but she still couldn't imagine what the outside world was like. The outside world is very, very big. There are many planets, galaxies, nebulas, and star clusters. Even if there were 1,000 or 10,000 star dragon federations, they wouldn't be as big as 1/10,000th of the outside world. Moreover, there are many powerful cultivators in the outside world. The Yuanying stage is not even the beginning. Above the Yuanying stage is the Huashan stage, and above the Huashan stage is the Dongshu stage. Those in the Dongshu stage are called powerful cultivators and are already strong. However, above the Dongshu stage is the stronger combination stage, which is called the Overlord of the Universe. I'm now a Overlord of the Universe. Qin Chuan was very proud. He hoped that Ningya would be proud of him too. Chapter 1208. Looking at the proud look on Qin Chuan's face, Ningya smiled and said, "It seems that you are very powerful." Qin Chuan smiled and nodded. He replied, "If I wasn't powerful enough, I wouldn't have said that I would lead everyone out. With me around, everyone will definitely be able to develop better in the outside world." Ningya nodded gently and said, "I naturally trust your ability. However, not everyone in this world is willing to leave their homeland. If you want everyone to leave with you, it will be very difficult." Hearing Ningya's words, Qin Chuan was silent for a moment before he replied, "Teacher, this place is called the Land of Exile. It is not the homeland of the human clan or the demon clan. The outside world is our real homeland. I understand what you are saying, but you have to know that we have lived and multiplied in this place for countless years. For some people, the outside world is empty and unrealistic. Only here is their homeland." Ningya sighed. Of course, she understood Qin Chuan. She also understood that Qin Chuan had good intentions. However, some things were not as simple as they seemed. Now, she was telling Qin Chuan these things in the hopes of giving Qin Chuan some warning so that Qin Chuan could be mentally prepared. "Teacher, I understand what you mean." Qin Chuan smiled. "Everyone has their own aspirations. You can't force them. This time, I will leave with those who are willing to go with me. Those who are unwilling to leave can stay here." Qin Chuan had never liked to force others to do things that they did not want to do. If someone was unwilling to go to the outside world and wanted to stay in the land of exile, he would have no objections. "Teacher, you are willing to go with me, right?" Qin Chuan could ignore others, but he had to care about Ningya. This teacher had always taken care of him, taught him, and protected him when he was still weak. He could not ignore her. Ningya smiled and said to Qin Chuan, "As long as you don't think I'm a burden, I'm certainly willing to follow you to see the vast world outside." Qin Chuan's face immediately revealed a touch of joy when he heard this, and he said, "Then it's settled." While Qin Chuan and Ningya were chatting, the Hope slowly arrived above the Black Moon Combat Academy, attracting the attention of many people. Many batches of students had changed in the Black Moon Combat Academy, and some of the teachers had retired. Therefore, when Bai Yu's figure appeared above the Black Moon Combat Academy, she did not attract much attention. Instead, it was Chun Chongxing and the others who were recognized. The world has changed. Things remain the same, but people have changed. The students now, other than Boss, probably don't remember you and Luzi. Chun Chongxing chuckled and asked Bai Yu, "You won't be sad about this, right?" Bai Yu smiled and shook her head, saying, "Why would I be sad? Isn't it normal that everyone doesn't know each other?" Long Xiao smiled and said, "In the past, Bai Yu was the one who spoke the least. She usually stayed hidden most of the time and would only step forward at critical moments. At that time, there weren't many people paying attention to her, let alone now. However, I've noticed that Bai Yu seems to be much more cheerful this time." It was not only Long Xiao who felt this, but Chun Chongxing also felt the same. After all, Bai Yu almost never smiled in the past. Bai Yu smiled and replied, "Some things have been put down, some things have been undone, and some wishes have been fulfilled. Naturally, I've become more cheerful." The Crimson General Kargad, who had caused the destruction of the elven race, was dead. The hope had been recovered, and she had seen the eternal forest. After experiencing so many things, she had completely transformed. She was no longer the taciturn Bai Yu. That's for the best. Chen Chongqing laughed. He was a person who liked to laugh, and the current Bai Yu was more to his liking. Who? A breeze blew and a petite and cute figure appeared in front of everyone. She looked at Bai Yu, who was standing between Chen Chongqing and Long Shao, with tears in her bright eyes. She choked and said, "Is it you? Little Yu?" Hearing this familiar name, Bai Yu smiled and opened her arms, saying, "Teacher Su, I'm back." Hearing Bai Yu's words, Su Yuluo immediately jumped into Bai Yu's arms and said happily, "You're finally back. I missed you so much." Bai Yu hugged Su Yuluo and said with a smile, "Teacher Su, you're like a child." "I'm a child," Su Yuluo cried in response. Although she was already at the great circle of the nascent soul stage, she had been a lowly for hundreds of years. She was still a child. Bai Yu finally calmed Su Yuluo's excited mood and said, "I came back this time because I was asked by someone to ask about Teacher Lu's situation." The Teacher Lu that Bai Yu mentioned was Lu Zi's grandfather, Lu Xiangyang. He was Lu Zi's only relative. This time, Lu Zi couldn't come back, so she asked Bai Yu to pay attention to Lu Xiangyang's situation. Su Yuluo replied, "Teacher Lu has been very good. He's now at the late stage of the nascent soul stage." Hearing Su Yuluo's answer, Bai Yu was relieved. No matter what Lu Xiangyang's realm was, as long as he was alive, it was fine. When he went to the outside world, with Lu Zi and Qin Chuan, Lu Xiangyang would definitely live a long life. "Except for you, didn't the others come back?" Su Yuluo looked around but didn't see Qin Chuan and Lu Zi. Bai Yu smiled and said, "Lu Zi is in seclusion, so she didn't come back. Qin Chuan came back one step ahead of us. He should be with Teacher Ningya now." "Then let's go find him." Su Yuluo was very concerned about Qin Chuan, the most outstanding student in the history of the Black Moon Combat Academy. At this time, Qin Chuan and Ningya had already left the balcony and gone to the library in the backyard. When the Azure Ancient City had been destroyed, the library had also been reduced to ruins. Later, when the Black Moon Combat Academy had been rebuilt, Ningya had dug out the library from the ruins of the Azure Ancient City. She had taken out a portion of the books that hadn't been destroyed and reorganized them into the new library. This new library had been rebuilt according to the original library, so it didn't look any different. The only difference was that there was an additional tomb in the courtyard besides the flower bed. Ningya stood in front of the tomb and pursed her lips slightly. She said to Qin Chuan, "This is Teacher's tomb. He liked to read, so I buried him here." Qin Chuan took out a cup of wine and poured it in front of the tomb. He then knelt down and respectfully kowtowed 3 times to the tombstone. "Grand Master, I'm back." Looking at Qin Chuan kneeling in front of the tomb, Ningya said faintly, "Teacher, your spirit in heaven must be very pleased to see such an outstanding grand disciple. At least, I'm very pleased." Chapter 1209. When Bai Yu and the others came to Ningya's residence and found her, Qin Chuan had already left. He planned to walk around alone, visit some of the places he had been to, and reminisce about the past. Qin Chuan's first stop was the state capital of Qing, the place where he was born and raised. Since he left that year, he had never returned. Now, he wanted to go back and take a look, and settle some old matters. When Qin Chuan returned to his old residence in the slums, he was very surprised to find that the slums had been rebuilt and turned into a bustling city. However, his house was well preserved, and there was a big sign in front of the door. Qin Chuan's old residence. Seeing this sign, Qin Chuan did not know whether to laugh or cry. He really did not expect that something like this would happen to him. When he saw the old man who was almost 70 years old sitting under the sign and dozing off, Qin Chuan's eyes could not help but soften. Qinchuan's figure appeared in front of the sign and reached out to gently knock on the table. The old man who was dozing off was awakened. He looked up at Qinchuan and said, "Visit Qinchuan's old residence, 20." The old man stopped before he finished speaking. He stared blankly at Qinchuan and was stunned. Qinchuan saw this and laughed. He said, "Old man's son, we haven't seen each other for many years. Don't you recognize me?" "It's really you?" Old man's son was a little surprised, and then he laughed. As he laughed, he got up and hugged Qinchuan. "You're back?" Seeing that old man's son was not restrained because of the difference in status, but instead was as piercing as before, Qinchuan's heart could not help but soften. He said softly, "Yes, I'm back. I didn't expect you to be a ticket seller instead of a celestial device repair. Haha, I'm old now. That shop has been inherited by my grandson. Now I sell tickets here and help you look after this place." Old man's son laughed and said to Qinchuan, "Do you want to go in and have a look?" Qinchuan nodded, and then walked inside with old man Sunday. As they walked, old man's son was still sighing. "When I saw you just now, I didn't recognize you wrongly. I was just worried that you were not the Qinchuan I was familiar with. When I saw you smile and greet me, I was sure that you were the Qinchuan of the past. You were sensible and polite. Otherwise, I wouldn't dare to take the initiative to hug you." Hearing old man son's words, Qinchuan smiled and said, "No matter what I become, you will always be my old man son, my boss." Although Qinchuan had not returned to the state capital of Qing for many years, he had always been thinking about Old Man Sunday. Back then, before he met Ningya, if Old Man's son had not been kind enough to let him work in the shop, he would probably have to pick up garbage to eat. Looking at the familiar environment, Qinchuan felt as if he had returned to the time when he was 17 years old. At that time, he lived a fulfilling life every day. Whether he went to school or worked, he worked hard to survive. This place carried too many memories for him. Old man's son lit a cigarette, smacked his lips and said to Qinchuan, "I heard that you left the Star Dragon Federation, but I don't know where you went. You probably don't know much about the state capital of Qing now. The second middle school has reopened. Do you know who the principal is?" Qinchuan was curious and asked, "Who is the principal?" Old man's son grinned and said, "It's that girl from back then." Although old man's son didn't say that person's name, Qinchuan already knew who that person was. Recalling what had happened in the past, the expression on his face couldn't help but become a little complicated. This girl came back 10 years ago. At that time, she was already a nascent soul cultivator. She should have had a bright future ahead of her. However, she suddenly came back and restarted the second high school. She became the principal of the school. After all these years, the second high school has become the best high school in the state capital of Qing. Then she is really amazing. Qinchuan smiled and suddenly wanted to go back and have a look. With Wang Wenshue's talent, she should have been a cultivator in the perfected nascent soul stage if she focused on cultivation. However, in the past 10 years, she put all her efforts into teaching and educating people, so she was only in the advanced nascent soul stage. However, Wang Wenxue did not have any regrets or dissatisfaction about this. On the contrary, she felt that her current life was the most suitable for her. On this day, Wang Wenxue did not work in the office. She stood on the balcony and looked at the sky in the distance, feeling slightly complicated. Not long ago, Yiqing Ning sent her a message and told her that the person who had left for 15 years had returned. Yiqing Ning did not say the name, but Wang Wenxue knew who that person was. She did not know if that person still remembered her, nor did she know if that person knew everything that she had done until now. However, she knew in her heart that the gap between her and that person had become extremely huge. Perhaps she did not even have the right to appear in front of that person. Long time no see. Suddenly, Wang Wenxue heard a very familiar voice. She slowly turned her head and looked to the side and smiled. Indeed, It has been a long time. Qin Chuan looked at the school outside the balcony and smiled. I have never looked at the school from this angle before, but I feel that everything should be the same as before. Indeed, there is no difference. Wang Wenxue nodded. Except for the people, everything is the same. Qin Chuan nodded. You must have worked hard all these years. Teaching and educating people is not hard. Wang Wenxue smiled. I feel that I have lived a very happy and fulfilling life. It is very gratifying to see these little guys grow up happily and safely without being oppressed or ostracized. That is very good. Qin Chuan smiled and suddenly asked, Is Black City still there? Wang Wenxue nodded. Yes, it is. It is said that it is because you owed a favor to City Lord Qin that Black City was able to be preserved. Qin Chuan laughed when he heard Wang Wenxue's words. You're right. I did owe them a favor back then. Now, it's time for me to return the favor. Wang Wenxue nodded gently. Go, and thank you for coming to see me. No need to thank me, after all, we are friends. As the sound of his voice faded, Qin Chuan's silhouette had already vanished. Wang Wenxue stared at the empty space beside her, feeling as though she was in a dream. However, she was very clear that everything that had happened earlier was not a dream. I wonder how powerful he has become now. Wang Wenxue smiled. Anyway, he must be more powerful than her. Chapter 12:10. Ever since the incident in the Sky City, the Black Cities all over the world had been affected. Only a few of them had survived, and that was the Black City in the state capital of Qing. The mayor, Qin Hua, was now a cultivator in the exceptional gold core realm. The deputy mayor, Chu Ning, had also stepped into the gold core realm. As the only remaining Black City in the Star Dragon Federation, it was more lively and prosperous than before. Even during the day there were people coming and going. Many people came because of its reputation, because many people knew that the Black City could survive because of Qin Chuan. And Qin Chuan was the idol of many people, especially the young people. The mayor's mansion. Qin Hua stood in front of the window and looked at the prosperous Black City. He couldn't help but think of what had happened here in the past. At that time, he was still a cultivator in the Foundation establishment realm. He met Qin Chuan here for the first time. At that time, he didn't realize how many miracles that ordinary young man would create in the future and how many wonderful stories he would leave behind. Father, this is the financial report of last month. Chu Ning, who was wearing a black suit, walked over slowly and stood behind Qin Hua. She looked out of the window like Qin Hua. Looking at the prosperous Black City, she was speechless for a long time. She didn't know when it started, but Chu Ning had the same habit as Chu Hua. They both liked to stand in front of the floor-to-ceiling window and admire the scenery outside. Sometimes the focus was on the people, and sometimes the focus was on the buildings. Sometimes, after looking for a long time, Chu Ning didn't know what she was looking at. She was just used to standing here and looking out of the window. Just as Chu Hua and Chu Ning were quietly looking out of the window, Qin Chuan's figure quietly appeared behind them. Looking at Chu Hua and Chu Ning, who were standing side by side, he smiled and said softly, "Long time no see." Hearing the sudden appearance of a third person, Chu Hua and Chu Ning subconsciously turned around. When they saw the familiar face of Qin Chuan, Chu Hua and Chu Ning were stunned. "Don't be surprised. I'm here today to repay the favor of that year." Qin Chuan looked at Chu Hua. "If it weren't for the 2 talisman arrays you provided me, my initial cultivation path might not have been so smooth." In less than 10 minutes, Qin Chuan left the Black City. Chu Ning stood aside and looked at Chu Hua, who had advanced from the Jedon Perfect stage to the Yuanying stage. His eyes were full of shock. Just now, Qin Chuan had only lightly tapped Chu Hua's forehead, and Chu Hua had broken through the calmness of the Golden Core realm and directly entered the nascent Soul realm. Just as the lightning tribulation condensed, Qin Chuan dispersed it with a wave of his hand. In Chu Ning's opinion, this was simply the work of an immortal. After Chu Hua quietly felt the power of the nascent soul stage, he turned his head and looked at Chu Ning. He whispered, "Now, our Chu clan has nothing to do with him anymore." At the beginning, Chu Hua's request to Qin Chuan was to let Qin Chuan help him to advance from the foundation establishment stage to the golden core stage. Now, although Qin Chuan's return came a little late, he helped him to advance from the golden core stage to the nascent soul stage. It was definitely an advantage for him. Otherwise, with his talent, he might not be able to touch the threshold of the nascent soul stage in this lifetime. "Get ready, we'll leave the Black City and hand over the management of the Black City to the Federation." Chu Hua was very smart. There were some things that could be done in the past, but definitely not now. Coming to the Cloud Dragon Mountain Range again, Qin Chuan couldn't help but think of Zhou Lin's figure. The first time he came to the Cloud Dragon Mountain Range, it was Zhou Lin who brought him here. At that time, he was just a little guy in the body refining stage, not even an official cultivator. It was Zhou Lin who led him on the road of cultivation. If it wasn't for Zhou Lin, maybe he could also become a cultivator, but he would definitely have to take a lot of detours. After passing through the layers of illusion, Qin Chuan slowly walked to a lonely grave. Back then, he personally buried Zhou Lin here. Now that 15 years have passed, everything here was still the same as when he left. There was almost no change. "Senior sister, I'm back to see you." Qin Chuan squatted in front of the grave and looked at the tombstone with an extremely complicated gaze. At this moment, Zhou Lin's voice and smile appeared in front of his eyes. Buzz! Just when Qin Chuan was recalling the past, there was a sudden movement in his storage ring. He was a little surprised and took out a golden stream of light from the storage ring. This golden stream of light just left the storage ring and flew out of Qin Chuan's control and went straight into the grave. Seeing this scene, Qin Chuan couldn't help but exclaim in a low voice, "What's going on? Lin, could it really be senior sister?" All this time, Qin Chuan had been curious about whether there was a connection between Lin and Zhou Lin. Although there were many coincidences, he didn't have any conclusive evidence. Now that the golden stream of light suddenly reacted in front of Zhou Lin's grave, Qin Chuan realized that perhaps something was about to happen. Under Qin Chuan's expectant and nervous gaze, a slightly pale hand reached out from under the grave. Whoosh! The grave was completely pushed away, and a pale figure emerged from it. If an ordinary person were to see this scene, they would probably be scared to death. However, Qin Chuan's heart was filled with joy. That familiar aura, she's back. Qin Chuan, half of Zhou Lin's body, was sitting in the soil. She looked at Qin Chuan squatting in front of her, and a smile suddenly appeared on her face. "I had a dream. I dreamed of many, many things. It was about some strange experiences, and it was also about you." Zhou Lin looked at Qin Chuan. "I want to tell you." Qin Chuan's eyes were filled with tears. He smiled and nodded. "All right, let's talk slowly. I'll listen." The story wasn't very long. Zhou Lin only took one night to finish telling it. In the story, Zhou Lin fell asleep. When she woke up, she appeared in a palace. She forgot her past, didn't know who she was, and didn't know why she was here. She lived in confusion and ignorance. Later on, she met a very special person. Later on, she followed that special person out of that world and into a wider world. In this wider world, she learned a lot of knowledge and made some new friends. She also encountered some things, both good and bad. Among these things, the one that she cared about the most was that special person. His name was Qin Chuan. "I really have to thank you for being able to wake up again, Qin Chuan." Zhou Lin looked at Qin Chuan. Her gaze was gentle as always. Qin Chuan smiled and said to Zhou Lin, "Senior sister, welcome back." Chapter 12:11. It took Qin Chuan 10 days to travel across half of the Star Dragon Federation. Finally, he arrived at Star Dragon City. In Star Dragon City, there were many friends and opponents of his past. But now that more than 10 years had passed, he had let go of the past. This time, he came to Star Dragon City not only to see Fatty Wang Bo, but also to see Qin Ju and Gowan. The Fatty Wang Bo from back then had now become a famous doctor in the Star Dragon Federation. His medical skills were superb. As long as the person wasn't dead, no matter how serious the injury was, he could save them. In addition, it was rumored that Wang Bo and Qin Chuan were brothers. This made Wang Bo's status even more extraordinary. Later on, there was a saying, "It was better to offend Chairman Gao than Miracle Dr. Wang." When Qin Chuan heard about this, he did not know whether to laugh or cry. He did not expect Wang Bo to become a miracle doctor after so many years. He was really not simple. Didn't that person say that Wang Bo comes to the East City almost every day? Let's go and take a look. Zhou Lin was very unfamiliar with the changes in Star Dragon City. After more than 10 years, Star Dragon City was no longer the Star Dragon City she was familiar with. Qin Chuan smiled and nodded. That's good too. Let's go and take a look. As soon as Qin Chuan and Zhou Lin arrived at the East City, they saw a long line. There were at least 4,000 to 5,000 people in the line. These people were all here to see Wang Bo. With Wang Bo's diagnosis speed, the limit of a day was about 1,000 people. The others were here to occupy a spot. It was said that the line now would be effective in the future. If someone dared to cut the line, they could forget about getting Wang Bo to treat them in their lifetime. Not only that, they would even be rejected by the entire medical system. Therefore, no one dared to cut the line. Zhou Lin looked at the situation in the line and said to Qin Chuan, "If we have to line up, we will have to wait for about 5 days before we can see Wang Bo." Qin Chuan glanced at the patients in the queue who looked weak and were enduring the pain. He smiled and said, "Leave this to me." As he spoke, Qin Chuan lifted his hand and gently waved it towards the group. Pure energy seeped out of his body and circled around the group like a light smoke. Anyone who was touched by the light smoke would have their illnesses cured in an instant. Their wounds also healed in the blink of an eye. As more and more of this happened, the group immediately became chaotic. Although Qin Chuan's cultivation base had been suppressed to the perfected nascent soul stage, his power was truly that of a body integration stage overlord. The purity of this power was the perfect treatment for ordinary people. Although Qin Chuan didn't know how to treat patients, he could easily wipe out the virus in the patient's body. His methods of saving people were even better than Wang Bo's. What's going on? Have I recovered? Really? My leg is not limp. That's great. My arm has been reattached. More and more cheers rang out from the crowd, so much so that the entire East City was in an uproar. Everyone was cheering Wang Bo's name and praising his achievements. This made Wang Bo, who was sitting in the clinic, extremely confused. He had no idea what was going on. "Thank you, Miracle Dr. Wang. Miracle Dr. Wang, your kindness is like a new life. I can't thank you enough. Thank you, Miracle Dr. Wang. You are a good person." "Thank you, Miracle Dr. Wang." Wang Bo sat on the chair in a daze. He looked at the excited crowd outside the door and asked curiously, "What's going on? Have these people recovered from their illnesses?" Wei Zixin, who was sitting beside him, shook her head and said, "I'm not sure either." Perhaps, before Wei Zixin could finish her sentence, 2 figures suddenly appeared in the clinic and stood in front of them. When they saw the familiar faces, both Wang Bo and Wei Zixin were stunned. Qin Chuan smiled and said to Wang Bo, "In order to see my good brother as soon as possible, I treated those people's illnesses. I hope you don't mind that I stole your job." Upon hearing Qin Chuan's words, Wang Bo exclaimed excitedly. He jumped up from the chair and jumped into Qin Chuan's arms. "Brother, you're finally back." Looking at Wang Bo, who was crying tears of joy, Qin Chuan grinned and said, "Brother, I'm back. After the free clinic, Wang Bo and Wei Zixin led Qin Chuan and Zhou Lin home. On the way home, Qin Chuan found out that Wang Bo and Wei Zixin had gotten married more than a decade ago. They had a daughter named Wang Tiantian. Congratulations! It's a pity that I couldn't attend your wedding. Qin Chuan smiled and said to Wang Bo, let's make up for it tonight. We're not going home until we're drunk. That's exactly what I was waiting for. Wang Bo laughed. I know your cultivation is high, but you're not allowed to force the alcohol out of your body. Otherwise, I'll fight you. When they returned home, the 10-year-old Wang Tiantian actually recognized Qin Chuan at first glance and sweetly called him uncle. Qin Chuan was surprised, but Wang Bo and Wei Zixin were not surprised at all. This was because Wang Bo had photos of Qin Chuan in his family's photo album. There were also photos of Qin Chuan displayed on the table at home. Wang Tiantian had even grown up listening to stories about Qin Chuan. She was naturally very familiar with Qin Chuan. Just as Qin Chuan and Wang Bo's family were happily drinking, eating, and chatting, a new guest arrived at Wang Bo's home. It was the chairman of the Star Dragon Federation, Gao En. Gao En learned about Qin Chuan's return from Chen Chongqing. However, because Qin Chuan was alone, Gao En was not able to contact Qin Chuan at first. It was not until today that he heard about the miracle that happened in the East City that he guessed that Qin Chuan had returned and came to look for Wang Bo, that he came uninvited. Gao En and Qin Chuan could be considered comrades in arms in the past, and the two had a good relationship. Therefore, Qin Chuan was only happy about Gao En's arrival and did not feel displeased at all. However, Gao En was still shocked when he saw Zhou Lin, who had come back from the dead. He did not expect that Qin Chuan had even learned the ability to bring the dead back to life. With regards to this, Qin Chuan smiled and gave a simple explanation before brushing it aside. If Gao En had not taken the initiative to look for him tonight, Qin Chuan would have gone to look for Gao En the next day. After all, Gao En was the chairman of the Star Dragon Federation. If he wanted to migrate all the humans to the outside world, he would need Gao En's help. After Qin Chuan and Gao En had a toast, Qin Chuan directly asked, Brother Gao, what do you think of the outside world? Have you ever thought of leaving here and looking around? Chapter 12:12. Hearing Qin Chuan's question, Gao En wasn't surprised, because as early as when Chen Chongqing contacted him, he had already revealed Qin Chuan's idea to him, so he was mentally prepared. Qin Chuan, to be honest, your idea of migrating everyone to the outside world is not realistic. We cultivators certainly yearn for the outside world and want to go out, but for some ordinary people, I'm afraid it's very difficult to make them leave their homes. Every word Gao En said was carefully considered. Qin Chuan's idea was certainly good, but it was too idealistic and not realistic. Qin Chuan smiled and said, I have naturally considered this point. I will only take those who are willing to leave to the outside world, and those who are not willing to leave can stay. I won't force anyone. Hearing Qin Chuan's words, Gao En was relieved. He was really worried that Qin Chuan would force everyone to leave together. In that case, he was afraid that it would cause a lot of trouble. I think most of the cultivators will be willing to leave here and go to the outside world. Gao En smiled and said to Qin Chuan, We will be basking in your glory again. Qin Chuan smiled and said to Gao En, Brother Gao, I wonder how our relationship with the demon realm has been all these years? Hearing Qin Chuan ask about the demon realm, Gao En replied, Since Zerg's invasion, our relationship with the demon realm has become much more harmonious than before. Speaking until here, Gao En paused for a moment, then said, In the demon realm, the current demon emperor is no longer Yao Feng, but Yao Rao. Yao Rao. Hearing Gao En say this very familiar name, the expression on Qin Chuan's face couldn't help but become somewhat subtle. In the matter of those years, although no one was in the wrong, but in the end, he had let down Yao Rao. So all along, Qin Chuan felt that he owed Yaorao in his heart, but he didn't know how to compensate Yaorao. Seeing Qin Chuan was silent, Gaoan coughed and said, "Brother, there is one thing you still don't know. After Yaorao became the demon emperor, she was destined not to marry in this life. This is the rule of the demon realm, so you don't need to think about some things." Qin Chuan nodded gently and said, "I know about this matter, and this time, not only will we leave here, the demon realm will also leave together. I want to trouble Brother Gao to personally go and tell the demon realm about this matter. No matter what decision they make, I will respect it." Hearing Qin Chuan's words, Gaoan nodded and said, "Leave this matter to me, don't worry. Don't worry." After talking about the demon realm, everyone tacitly ended the topic and started a new one. They talked about everything under the sun until the next morning. When the sky was bright, Qin Chuan had already left alone. He wanted to go to the Qin clan to pay respects to his mother in the ancestral hall. When Qin Chuan arrived at the Qin clan's ancestral hall without alerting anyone, he unexpectedly saw Qin Ju in the ancestral hall. However, Qin Ju wasn't surprised at all by Qin Chuan's arrival. "Changxing told me that you were back. I didn't know if you would come to see me, but I guessed that you would definitely come to pay respects to sister, so I waited here for you. Fortunately, I finally managed to wait for you." Qin Ju looked at Qin Chuan, whose appearance hadn't changed at all, with a gratified expression on his face. After walking the martial world for half of his life, he still returned as a youth. Qin Chuan smiled and said to Qin Ju, "I have no intention of avoiding Little Ant. Because Star Dragon City is the last stop, I plan to see Little Ant again after I come to Star Dragon City. Otherwise, I would have come to see Little Ant as soon as possible." Hearing Qin Chuan's words, Qin Ju sneered and said, "If Ningya hadn't called me 10 days ago, I would have believed you." Qin Chuan's face immediately revealed an awkward expression when he heard this. In the past, he knew that Ningya and Qin Ju were always competing with each other and were bad friends. He originally thought that after more than 10 years, Ningya, who had already become the dean, would become more mature. He didn't expect her to still be so childish. Not long after he left, she immediately called Qin Ju to show off. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Looking at the awkward expression on Qin Chuan's face, Qin Ju smiled and said, "All right, let's not talk about this anymore. Come in." Qin Chuan followed behind Qin Ju and walked into the Qin family's ancestral hall. In the hall of the ancestral hall, the ancestral tablets of the Qin family's ancestors were enshrined. On the left side of the offering table, there was a smaller offering table with only 2 memorial tablets on it. Qin Tian, Qin Qing. Looking at the names on the tablets, Qin Ju whispered to Qin Chuan, "I was the one who made the decision to release their tablets separately." Qin Chuan nodded lightly and said to Qin Ju, "Thank you." Qin Ju moved aside and said to Qin Chuan, "Go pay your respects to them." Qin Chuan stepped forward and knelt respectfully in front of the memorial tablet. He kowtowed 3 times to Qin Tian and Qin Qing's memorial tablets and said, "Father, Mother, although I don't have any memories of the 2 of you, I know that the 2 of you are good parents. Fortunately, as a son, I did not disappoint you. Your spirits in heaven should be gratified." Hearing Qin Chuan's words, Qin Ju, who was standing at the side, sighed and said, "I think they will be very gratified." After paying their respects to their parents, Qin Chuan and Qin Ju left the ancestral hall and went to the courtyard outside. "Qin Chuan, I heard that you plan to bring everyone away from here to the outside world?" Qin Ju looked at Qin Chuan curiously. He wanted to know what Qin Chuan was planning. Qin Chuan nodded and said to Qin Ju, "That's right, I do have this idea. However, I will definitely not force you. It's all voluntary." At this point, Qin Chuan paused for a moment before continuing, "This time, I will treat everyone equally and will not have any prejudice. Therefore, if the Qin family also wants to leave, I will not have any objections. Qin Ju smiled and said, I didn't see you to plead for mercy. I'm just curious about what the outside world is like. Will we not be able to get used to going to the outside world without any foundation? Qin Chuan replied, I've thought about this question before, but I don't think it's difficult. After all, I've experienced this before. As long as I read more books and understand more things, I'll naturally be familiar with the outside world. Qin Chuan had naturally considered this question raised by Qin Ju. Before he left Stansos, he had already asked Thelon to help him get some ordinary books and materials to send to Starting Point City. As long as the people who left with him knew how to read and were willing to read, he believed that everyone would be able to quickly familiarize themselves with the outside world. Chapter 12-13. On the third day after Qin Chuan and Zhou Lin arrived at Star Dragon City, Chen Changxing and the others also arrived at Star Dragon City on the Hope. When they saw Zhou Lin standing beside Qin Chuan, everyone's eyes widened. They thought they had seen a ghost. Chen Changxing looked at Zhou Lin in shock and asked, Are you a human or a ghost? Hearing this, Zhou Lin smiled and said, I'm neither human nor ghost. Hearing Zhou Lin's answer, Chen Changxing was a little confused. The others were also confused. If she was neither human nor ghost, then what could she be? Qin Chuan chuckled and explained to everyone, Senior sister is indeed neither human nor ghost now, but a cute metal path. When everyone heard Qin Chuan's explanation, they couldn't help but become even more confused. What was a cute metal path? Seeing this, Qin Chuan patiently explained to everyone. Speaking of a cute metal path, he had to mention what happened in the Carefree Secret Realm. Qin Chuan once entered the Carefree residence and took out 3 treasures. One was the Purple Star Divine Pupil, which was obtained by Lu Zi, the other was the Phoenix Feather, which was obtained by Yao Rao, and the last was the mysterious Golden Jelly, which was obtained by Zhou Lin. In the following period, whether it was the Purple Star Divine Pupil obtained by Lu Zi or the Phoenix Feather obtained by Yao Rao, they all showed their own miraculous abilities. Only Zhou Lin, who obtained the mysterious Golden Jelly, didn't show any peculiarities. It wasn't until Zhou Lin died that the Golden Jelly finally showed signs of activity. With the help of the Golden Jelly, Zhou Lin's divine soul roamed the space and accidentally entered the trial ground, becoming Lin of acute metal path. Some unforeseen events later caused Lin to turn into a golden stream of light and fall into a deep sleep. When Qin Chuan returned to the Cloud Dragon Mountain range and approached Zhou Lin's body, the golden stream of light immediately formed a connection with the golden jelly in Zhou Lin's body, causing Zhou Lin to come back from the dead. However, the resurrected Zhou Lin was no longer a person of flesh and blood, but the acute metal path that controlled the law of metal. It was also at this time that Qin Chuan realized that the mysterious golden jelly was actually the solidified law of metal. When he discovered this situation, Qin Chuan was startled. He never thought that the golden jelly would actually be the law of gold. He was very curious about the identity of the carefree scholar back then. He was actually able to obtain such a rare treasure like the solidified law of gold. Qin Chuan guessed that the law of metal had already solidified into a jelly. Carefree scholar might not be able to recognize what the golden jelly was, and the reason for this situation, the law of metal had already solidified, was probably not recognized jelly. Therefore, he might not be able to didn't recognize the golden jelly. The law probably didn't recognize, didn't know what the golden jelly was not recognized the golden jelly. If that wasn't the case, Carefree Scholar would definitely try his best to absorb the metal law instead of leaving it behind. After figuring this out, Qin Chuan was filled with emotions. Perhaps Zhou Lin was already destined to face a calamity in her life. The existence of the law of metal gave Zhou Lin a second chance at life, which was to transform into the acute metal path and continue to live in another way. If Qinchuan hadn't met Zhou Lin, who had already turned into the acute metal path in the trial ground, perhaps Zhou Lin would have experienced some other things and continued to live in the universe. But because of Qinchuan's appearance, Zhou Lin, who had turned into the acute metal path, had the opportunity to return to the Cloud Dragon mountain range and fuse with the law of metal again. After hearing Qinchuan's explanation, everyone was extremely surprised. No one expected Zhou Lin's resurrection to have so much hidden information. But no matter what, it was still a good thing for everyone to celebrate. In the midst of everyone's laughter, Qinchuan looked at Zhou Lin and asked, "Senior sister, do you have anything to say?" Hearing Qinchuan's words, Zhou Lin pursed her lips and said, "The past is the past. From today onwards, although I am still Zhou Lin, I have nothing to do with the past Zhou Lin." Qinchuan nodded gently and said, "Then congratulations on your rebirth. But now I'm very curious, what realm are you in?" Qinchuan was sure that the current Zhou Lin was definitely not in the exceptional gold core realm, nor was she in the profound void realm. As for what realm she was in, Qinchuan wasn't sure for the time being. Zhou Lin smiled and said to Qinchuan, "I feel that my current strength shouldn't be worse than yours." Qinchuan was stunned for a moment. He looked at Zhou Lin strangely and said, "Are you that confident?" Qinchuan was well aware of his own strength. With his current strength, he could kill a pinnacle body integration stage overlord in a head-on confrontation. Even if he were to face a perfected body integration stage overlord, he would still be able to escape with his life. In the past, Zhou Lin died when she was in the exceptional gold core realm. Later on, she turned into the acute gold Dao and was only at the Dongshu realm. After sleeping for a period of time and waking up, her strength was on par with his. This speed of growth was a little too exaggerated. "It's not that I'm confident," Zhou Lin looked at Qinchuan and said with a smile, "it's the gold Dao that gave me confidence." When a Dongshu realm cultivator advanced to the combination realm, they had to fuse all kinds of power into one. If they wanted to become stronger, they had to fuse with the power of the gold Dao. Zhou Lin, on the other hand, only had the acute gold Dao in her body. She had already fused with the gold Dao. If she wanted to become a peak combination realm overlord, she had already done everything. Moreover, she did it more naturally than other peak combination realm overlords. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that if Zhou Lin mastered the method to advance to the tribulation passing stage, she would probably become a supreme existence in the tribulation passing stage very soon. Zhou Lin was now like a genius student. While others were still studying step by step and taking exams year by year, she had already skipped grades and entered university. Although Qinchuan was also skipping grades, compared to Zhou Lin's speed, he was still slower. Qinchuan looked at the confident smile on Zhou Lin's face and said with a smile, "Senior sister, if you really become as powerful as me, or even stronger than me, that would be a good thing. This way, the burden on my shoulders would be lighter. If you have any needs, you can come find me at any time." Zhou Lin smiled at Qinchuan and said, "In my heart, you will always be that little junior brother." Just as everyone was having a lively gathering, Qinchuan received a message from Gaoen. After drinking with Qinchuan that day, Gaoen directly set off for the demon realm. Calculating the time, he should have arrived at Mount Tianyao by now. Since he sent a message at this time, it seemed that he had already communicated with the demon realm. "Brother, I've already met the demon emperor. However, she didn't give me a chance to talk about the migration. She specifically asked to see you. If you don't come, she will continue to imprison me." After reading the message, Qinchuan's expression couldn't help but become a little complicated. There were some things that couldn't be avoided. Chapter 12-14. This was the second time Qinchuan had come to Heavenly Monster Plain. He stood in the sky, looking at the heavenly monster mountain in front of him, and his mood was particularly complicated. In those years, he and Yaorao got to know each other in carefree secret realm. Later, he entered World Mountain and traveled with Yaorao to Demon World, and went straight to Heavenly Monster Mountain. After going through untold hardships, he broke Zerg's treacherous plan and got engaged with Yaorao. He should have become the son-in-law of Demon Race, and live happily ever after with Yaorao, but later on too many things happened, so much so that both of them had different choices in the end. One wanted to stay in banished land, and pass her days in peace and stability, while the other wanted to leave banished land, and go to the outside world to wander. Different ideals made both of them go their separate ways. But no matter what, Qin Chuan always felt that he owed Yaorao. This time, after returning, he didn't know how to face Yaorao, so he simply chose to avoid meeting her. This was also the reason why he asked Gao En to contact Demon Race on his behalf, and tell Demon Race about the migration. But in the end, he still couldn't avoid this hurdle, and in the end, he still had to meet Yaorao. With Qin Chuan's current strength, he could easily enter Heavenly Monster Mountain, but he didn't do so, and instead handed over the visiting card according to the rules of Heavenly Monster Mountain. Qin Chuan asked to see Demon Emperor. In Heavenly Monster Temple, a tall figure was sitting upright on the throne. She was wearing a red dress inlaid with gold, and her temperament was graceful and luxurious, and her exquisite face was cold and indifferent, revealing the majesty and strength of a ruler. She was none other than Yaorao, who had succeeded the position of Demon Emperor. Yaorao lowered her head and looked at the visiting card in her hand, and her expression was indifferent. She didn't show any emotion because of the name, Qin Chuan, on the visiting card, as if he was just a stranger. Invite him to come up the mountain. Along with the order of Yaorao, the Ministry of Rites of Heavenly Demon Mountain immediately dispatched people to welcome Qin Chuan as a distinguished guest. But every demon clan who participated in the welcoming ceremony looked at Qin Chuan with scowling eyes, and their attitude was very cold. What had happened between Qin Chuan and Yaorao in those years was not a secret. Many demon race knew that Qin Chuan had betrayed Yaorao in order to leave the land of exile and pursue a higher realm. Therefore, in the eyes of demon race, Qin Chuan was a heartless man through and through. Now that Qin Chuan had once again appeared in Mount Tianyao, it would be strange if these demons who knew about the past didn't treat Qin Chuan well. Facing the cold gazes of monster race, Qin Chuan didn't get angry, nor did he feel embarrassed. He climbed the stairs step by step and directly entered Heavenly Monster Temple, and saw Yaorao sitting on the throne. When old friends met, there were no tears in their eyes, nor were there myriad of emotions, there was only silence. See you again after 15 years, Qin Chuan couldn't find any opening words for the time being, so he could only say, long time no see. Yaorao calmly looked at Qin Chuan and indifferently said, shouldn't you greet me first? Hearing Yaorao's words, Qin Chuan was slightly taken aback, then with a wry smile he said, Qin Chuan greets your majesty. Yaorao looked at Qin Chuan, who was bowing to pay his respect, then indifferently said, no need to be overly courteous, I wonder what matter Mr. Qin has come here for? Qin Chuan pursed his lips and said, I want to invite Demon Clan and Human Clan to migrate to the outside world and return to the universe. Yaorao already knew the purpose of Qin Chuan's visit, but hearing Qin Chuan's words, she still pretended not to understand and asked, migrate to the outside world? Return to the universe? How come I don't understand? I can. No need, today I am somewhat tired, if you have any matter, wait until tomorrow. Yaorao interrupted Qin Chuan, and without waiting for Qin Chuan to say anything, she directly got up and walked towards the back of the hall. Qin Chuan looked at the departing back view of Yaorao, then lightly sighed, but in the end he didn't say anything. After Yaorao walked into the back of the hall, she turned around to take a look behind her, and after determining that Qin Chuan didn't follow her, her heart began to jump, and that indifferent expression on her face faded away and changed into deep hidden bitterness. As early as the first day Qinchuan returned to the banished land, Yaorao had already received the news. She had thought that she could calmly face everything, but when she really saw Qinchuan, she discovered that she was completely unable to calm down, and was unable to maintain her dignity and pride as Demon Emperor. With no other choice, she could only use the excuse of being tired to leave the front hall, and temporarily didn't want to face Qinchuan. "You have already left, so why did you come back?" Yaorao sat on the couch, and her exquisite and charming face couldn't help but reveal a touch of misery. Her heart was in chaos in the end. "Rao, don't know when." Xueqiu's figure appeared beside Yaorao's couch. She looked at that complicated expression on Yaorao's face, then faintly sighed. She knew that Yaorao was still unable to thoroughly let go of that past feeling. "Empress Mother, why did you come?" As a great Yuanying realm Yaorao, because she was preoccupied, she actually didn't notice the existence of Xueqiu. She somewhat panicked and raised her hand, then used her wide sleeve to cover her face. She didn't want Xueqiu to see that sad expression on her face. "Raoer, do you still like him?" Xueqiu sat down beside Yaorao, then stretched out her hand and put down Yaorao's arm, then looking at Yaorao, she seriously asked. Having heard Xueqiu's question, Yaorao was silent for a moment, then replied. "I am the Demon Emperor. As the Empress, I want to maintain my purity. In this life, I will never be together with any man." Hearing Yaorao's words, Xueqiu sighed and said, "Your father Emperor is still here. You can still return this burden to your father Emperor." "No." Yaorao took a deep breath and said, "Since I have already succeeded as the Empress, then I won't easily give up. Moreover, me and him, it's impossible." Having heard her words, Xueqiu looked at Yaorao with a subtle look and asked, "Do you really think so?" "Empress Mother, you don't need to persuade me, also don't need to worry about me, and even more don't need to test me." Yaorao turned her head and looked at Xueqiu. She tried hard to make herself strong and said, "I am the Empress of Demon Race. In this life I will never rely on any man. At that time, since Qinchuan abandoned me in pursuit of the Great Tao, it proves that our fate has come to an end. He walked his own path, and I walked my own path, henceforth we have nothing to do with each other." Hearing Yaorao's words, Xueqiu looked at Yaorao with some guilt and said, "This matter, your father Emperor and I are to blame. If not for us two, you would have definitely left together with him." "Empress Mother, saying these things now is meaningless." Yaorao pursed her lips and said to Xueqiu, "Perhaps we can still be friends, but it's absolutely impossible for us to become lovers again. Some things, if you miss it, and if you give it up, you give it up. Even if a broken mirror is restored, there will still be cracks left behind, and I would rather go without than have something substandard." Chapter 12-15. As the curtain of night fell, Qinchuan was sitting alone on the roof, overlooking the distant night sky. The stars in the sky were not as bright as the bright moon. A cool breeze blew, and a charming figure slowly landed beside Qinchuan. It was Yaorao who had shed her embroidered clothes. At this moment, Yaorao looked somewhat like that year. Seeing Yaorao, Qinchuan was about to salute after being silent for a little while, but was interrupted by Yaorao. "Now I am Yaorao, not Demon Emperor." Yaorao faintly looked at Qinchuan, and spoke with indescribable complex tone. Having heard what was said, Qinchuan pursed his lips, then said in low voice, "I'm sorry." "Why are you suddenly saying sorry to me? You haven't done anything to let me down." Yaorao took out a jug of wine, drank a mouthful, then placed the jug between them. Qinchuan lowered his head, and took a glance at the jug of wine, then again raised his head and looked at Yaorao, then said in low voice, "I thought you didn't want to see me again." "Originally I indeed didn't want to see you again, but now it is different." Yaorao took a deep breath, then said, I decided to let go of the past, let go of the obsession in my heart, and start my life anew, so I must see you again, and thoroughly cut off all past ties." Hearing Yaorao, Qin Chuan became silent, and after a long time, he asked, "How do you intend to cut off all ties?" Yaorao turned her head and looked at Qin Chuan, then said, "You are still in Yuanyang body." Today, after seeing Qin Chuan for the first time, Yaorao discovered that Qin Chuan was still in Yuanyang body, and still hadn't experienced the matter between men and women. When she discovered this point, her mood was very subtle. Hearing Yaorao, Qin Chuan almost choked on his saliva. He somewhat awkwardly looked at Yaorao, then nodded his head and said, "Yes." Yaorao somewhat curiously asked, "You and Lu Zi, don't tell me you are not together?" Yaorao didn't believe that Qin Chuan and Lu Zi were still friends. Even if Qin Chuan was a stone, he should have been warmed up by Lu Zi. For so many years, only Lu Zi was the only one who was able to accompany Qin Chuan. Qin Chuan. Qin Chuan was silent for a moment before replying, "Little Zi and I are now boyfriend and girlfriend." Hearing Qin Chuan's answer, Yaorao smiled and said, "Then what am I, your ex-girlfriend?" Qin Chuan was silent again, somewhat didn't know how to answer this question. However, Yaorao didn't intend to let Qin Chuan off. She suddenly turned over and rode on top of Qin Chuan, then placed her hands on his shoulders, and deeply looked at Qin Chuan, then asked, "You have never thought about hugging left and right? Enjoying the blessing of two people?" Facing Yaorao's sudden intimate action, Qin Chuan was somewhat at a loss of what to do. He subconsciously wanted to push Yaorao away, but he was worried about causing deeper harm to Yaorao. So after hesitating for a moment, he could only sigh and replied, "I'm sorry, the matter of that year was indeed my problem, I let you down, but now, I don't want to let Lu Zi down." Qin Chuan knew a lot of people from his childhood, until now there were ordinary people and also powerful cultivators. Among these people, many of them had many women, 3 wives and 4 concubines, and some powerful female cultivators also had several male companions. There were innumerable passionate people, but single-minded people were very rare. And Qin Chuan was a single-minded person. If at that time Yaorao was willing to leave with him, then Qin Chuan and Lu Zi would only be good friends for the rest of their lives, and in any case, Qin Chuan would never cross the line. Unfortunately, all of this was only if, in fact, Yaorao chose to stay, and he chose to leave. In the following period of time, Lu Zi's constant companionship finally opened Qin Chuan's heart, and she became the second person to walk into Qin Chuan's heart, occupying Qin Chuan's entire heart. After experiencing regret and loss, Qin Chuan knew how to cherish what he had now, so in this life, he would never do anything to let down Lu Zi. If Qin Chuan was really that kind of person who was greedy for beauty, then those women he had encountered in the past, such as Zhua Sisi, Knight Serenity, and even sisters Caro and Bela, he would never let go of these stunning beauties. Even Zhou Lin, Long Xiao, and Bai Yu, he would never let go of them. Also because of this, at this time, facing the charming Yaorao, Qin Chuan's heart was as calm as still water, and he was not confused. Hearing Qin Chuan's answer, and looking at that serious expression on Qin Chuan's face, Yaorao suddenly got up and left, then sitting back, she lightly coughed and said, "Consider yourself to have passed the test." Speaking till here, Yaorao added, "Don't think too much, just now I didn't deliberately seduce you, rather I replaced Lu Zi to test your temperament." Having heard what was said, Qin Chuan glanced at Yaorao whose complexion was crimson red, then said in low voice, "Thank you." Yaorao picked up the wine jug and drank a mouthful of wine, then said to Qin Chuan in somewhat gloomy tone, "To be honest, in these 15 years, I have always been regretting and vexed. I felt that I had made a wrong choice at that time. If it was not for me making a wrong decision, perhaps we would have even had a child now." Qin Chuan didn't know how to respond to Yaorao's words. "I said these, there is no other meaning, I just want to spit out all the things that I have kept in my heart all these years. After tomorrow, I will forget everything that happened tonight. Yarao said to Qin Chuan, You also have to forget. Qin Chuan nodded his head and replied, Okay, I will forget. Having heard what was said, Yarao deeply looked at Qin Chuan and said, Qin Chuan, originally I still had a glimmer of hope for you, but now I have given up. I know you are not a fickle person, so I am very clear that if Lu Zi had not taken the initiative to give up, then it would be impossible for you to reconcile with me. Speaking till here, Yarao somewhat helplessly scratched her head and muttered, In those years, I was really too stupid and too naive. How could I have taken the initiative to give up? Even if I had agreed on a time for you to come back and marry me, that would have been good. Hearing the words of Yarao, Qin Chuan hesitated a bit, but in the end he didn't open his mouth. As a matter of fact, in those years he also had similar idea, merely at that time he didn't know whether he would be able to come back alive after going out this time. He was afraid of delaying Yarao, so he didn't open his mouth. If Qin Chuan shook his head, how could there be so many ifs in this world? This night, Yarao spoke a lot, and Qin Chuan had been quietly listening all along, not interrupting, and also not absent-minded. Until the sky was about to brighten, Qin Chuan and Yarao's side was already piled up with empty wine jugs. Qin Chuan, we are friends. Yarao let out a long breath, and with the help of wine, she spoke out these words that she had been holding in her heart all night, as the conclusion of this night's talk. Qin Chuan nodded his head and solemnly replied, We are friends and always will be. Chapter 12-16. 15 years ago, Yarao finally chose to let go of this precious relationship. 15 years later, Yarao truly chose to let go. As for Qin Chuan, it could be said that one of his worries had been resolved. His entire state of mind had been sublimated. He had a premonition that if he was in the outside world where the laws of heaven and earth were normal, perhaps he would have broken through to the late stage of Unity Realm. Similarly, Yarao's state of mind had also been sublimated. If they were in the outside world, perhaps she would have welcomed her deity transformation stage lightning tribulation. After last night's talk, Qin Chuan and Yarao had become a lot calmer when they met again in the afternoon of the next day. After Yarao understood the matters related to ancient demon clan as well as the matters of the outside world, she immediately made a decision. She was willing to leave the banished land together with Qin Chuan and go to the outside world. The matter of the demon race had been settled. The next step was to announce this news to the outside world and count the number of people who were willing to leave. After that, Qin Chuan went to the World Mountain. He once again went to the city in the mountain and met Zhongqiu. The matter of the World Mountain was also settled in a short time. The people who were willing to leave the banished land and head to the outside world would gather in Star Dragon City under the leadership of Zhongqiu. The same was true for the demon race. At this time, Gao En, who had already returned to Star Dragon City, had already gathered all the large airships of the Star Dragon Federation. With the help of Bai Yu, he had begun to modify them. Otherwise, the Hope alone wouldn't be able to carry too many people. As for Qin Chuan, he had arrived at the Dragon Spirit Lake and met with Hui Tong. Hui Tong still maintained the appearance of Qin Chuan when he left. There was almost no change. When he saw Qin Chuan, he respectfully knelt on one knee in front of Qin Chuan and said, "Greetings, Dragon Lord." Hearing this, Qin Chuan faintly smiled. He helped Hui Tong up and said, "We haven't seen each other for many years. Senior Hui Tong hasn't changed at all." While speaking, Qin Chuan looked at the huge grave behind Hui Tong and said softly, "Take me to pay respects to Senior Tsang Hao." Under the guidance of Hui Tong, Qin Chuan went to Tsang Hao's grave. He lit incense for Tsang Hao and told him about the migration. Although they were ready to leave the exiled land, Qin Chuan had no intention of moving Tsang Hao's grave. He didn't want to disturb Tsang Hao anymore. As for Hui Tong, he did not plan on leaving. He could no longer help Qinchuan, so he chose to stay and be a tomb keeper. Qinchuan chose to respect the decision of the Grey System. Senior, come with me to Dragon Valley again. Qinchuan took out the dragon orb and positioned the entrance to Dragon Valley at the Dragon Spirit Lake. Then, he sent the coordinates to Dusk Snake, who was still in outer space. A moment later, Dusk Snake's figure slowly descended from the sky. Master, this old servant is here. Qinchuan glanced at Dusk Snake and then at Huitong. He said to Huitong, Senior, this is Dusk Snake. He will be the tomb keeper of Dragon Valley in the future. You two can take care of each other in the future. Huitong gently nodded and then glanced at Huitong as a greeting. Huitong slightly bowed to Huitong to show his respect. After all, Qinchuan called Huitong Senior. As a servant, he naturally had to give Huitong enough respect, even if he was only at the peak of the nascent soul realm. Let's go. Qinchuan took the lead and entered Dragon Valley. Huitong followed closely behind and Dusk Snake brought up the rear. Coming to Dragon's Valley once again, Qinchuan's mood was very complicated. In the trip to Dragon's Valley back then, not only did he obtain the Dragon Ball, he also obtained the little armored dragon. It could be said that his harvest was great, and it was a great help to his rise later on. Revisiting this place, Qinchuan was very quiet and didn't say a word. Huitong also had a complicated mood and didn't have the mood to talk. Dusk Snake looked around curiously. He had heard of Dragon Valley a long time ago, but it was his first time here. In the future, he would probably guard this place forever until he died of old age. Regarding this, although Dusk Snake felt a little regretful, he didn't have any complaints because this was the best ending for him. When he first came to Dragon Valley, Qinchuan didn't have the ability to clean up all the Zerg here. This time, Qinchuan didn't let go of any corner and wiped out all the Zerg. Finally, Dragon Valley was peaceful. Qinchuan didn't let Huitong and Dusk Snake help. He personally collected all the true dragon remains in Dragon Valley and then returned to the prairie. This was the burial ground of true dragons. Qinchuan buried all the true dragon remains neatly under the prairie. The dragon race didn't have the rule of erecting tombstones, so Qinchuan didn't erect tombstones either. Moreover, he didn't know the names of these true dragons. In the end, Qinchuan took out Long Bow's remains and buried them in a place with the best scenery on the prairie. This was Qinchuan's compensation for breaking his promise. After doing all this, Qinchuan slowly turned his head and looked at Dusk Snake. Dusk Snake, from today onwards, you will guard this place and guard Senior Long Bow's tomb. Without my permission, you are not allowed to leave the range of 100 li. I will let Senior Huitong provide you with your daily needs. Hearing Qinchuan's words, Dusk Snake bowed deeply towards Qinchuan and said sincerely, Thank you, Master, for giving this old servant a chance to make up for my mistake. This old servant will definitely not disobey Master's orders and guard the tomb with peace of mind. Qinchuan and Dusk Snake had a master-servant contract, and it was a master-servant contract without a time limit. As long as Qinchuan didn't die, the contract wouldn't be broken. Therefore, Qinchuan had to obey Qinchuan's words whether Dusk Snake liked it or not. Because of this, Qinchuan didn't say any words of warning. He only nodded towards Dusk Snake and turned around to leave. At this moment, a melodious dragon roar suddenly resounded in Dragon Valley. Following that, waves of dragon roars resounded one after another, rising and falling continuously. This sudden change caused Qinchuan to be a little surprised. He didn't know why so many dragon roars would suddenly resound in the Dragon's Valley. It was as if they were welcoming the return of a certain great existence. Rumble, roar. At this moment, the ancestral Dragon Mountain range that surrounded Dragon Valley suddenly shook violently. The entire mountain range seemed to be coming alive as a dragon roar resounded throughout the heavens and earth. Hearing this dragon roar, Qinchuan's expression suddenly turned into shock. Could it be that the legendary ancestral dragon was about to awaken? When this thought appeared in Qinchuan's mind, the bronze ring on his left ring finger suddenly flashed with a hazy light. In the next moment, Qinchuan's consciousness appeared in a resplendent starry sky. In front of Qinchuan's eyes, the silhouette of a gigantic dragon that covered the sky was spiraling. The dragon's head was held high and a pair of gigantic golden dragon eyes stared straight at Qinchuan, emitting a heart-palpitating pressure. Ancestral dragon. Almost subconsciously, Qinchuan believed that the gigantic dragon in front of him must be the ancestral dragon, the leader of all dragons. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.